Chapter 727. It was not that Gawain had never dealt with enemies in the sky before, but the enemy in the sky that appeared in front of Gawain really shocked him. The height of the floating tree was far from the ground and did not cover the ground in the slightest. The holy city was not covered by the floating tree in the slightest. However, this did not mean that the floating tree in the sky was small. On the contrary, Gawain felt that the floating tree was quite big. Based on Gawain's eyesight and his experience, the floating tree that appeared in the sky was quite large. In any case, it was definitely not smaller than the holy city behind him. The reason why the holy city was not covered by the shadow of the floating tree that appeared in the sky above the holy city was entirely because the new floating tree was too tall. Could it be the new force that appeared? Gawain frowned. When he fought with the angel not long ago, the angel revealed some things. Because it was just a hurried fight, the angel did not announce its name and the name of the force. However, Gawain felt that the new floating tree was related to the angel. Judging from the evidence, the two were indeed closely related. The angel had wings, and the floating tree was extremely high in the sky. Other than flying, Gawain did not know any other way to enter the floating tree. Therefore, this floating tree, which looked like a castle in the sky, should belong to the new force that had appeared. Whether the other party was here to fight or to negotiate, for Gawain, who was guarding the gate of the holy city, there was only one thing he needed to do. Stop the holy selection, everyone on alert. Gawain immediately ordered the Knights of Solemnity. Yes. The Knights of Solemnity responded to Gawain in unison. However, even if they were to fight, these Knights of Solemnity would probably not be of much use. Gawain thought so. After all, only servants could resist other servants, not to mention that the Knights of the Round Table had first-class servants. These Knights of Solemnity could only be used to clean up those who were not chosen. Although this was the truth, Gawain could not say it out loud. Without saying anything more, Gawain turned around and walked toward the interior of the holy city. The Knights of Solemnity also neatly changed their formation. From the original encirclement of the refugees, they lined up around the holy city. As a result, the refugees began to panic and lose their heads out of fear. The reason was simple. They did not know the background of the giant tree that appeared in the sky, nor did they know whether it was an ally or an enemy. However, the refugees knew one thing. If a fight were to break out, they would definitely be the first to suffer. Rise, the people suffer, fall, the people suffer. This saying not only applied to the place where this saying originated, but also to any region with royal authority. Gawain didn't seem to have any intention of caring about these refugees. Instead, he immediately entered the holy city. The solemn knights ignored the refugees. Thus, the refugees knew their fate. He was just a dispensable weakling. However, they had no choice. Before the Lion King was a kind person, he was still a king. It was impossible for them to vent their anger on the sacred city. Therefore, the refugees could only vent their frustrations on the floating trees that appeared in the sky. However, the solemn atmosphere at the gate of the holy city made it so that they did not dare to shout and curse. They could only express their dissatisfaction with the floating trees in their hearts. Inside the floating trees, or rather inside Abant, Wyrm sat in the monitoring room, silently watching the image of the holy city below. I didn't expect Abant's image to be so clear. Although he did not know how far Abant was from the ground, Wyrm knew that it was definitely not close. However, the image that Abant provided was at its largest, so detailed that it could reach the hair of the refugees that had fallen to the ground. Thus, using magic to reach the level of science did not make sense. Master, I'm ready." At this moment, Giliel's voice came from outside the room. Giliel very consciously did not open the door and directly floated in through the wall. The ability of the sky wings to pass through walls made Wyrm feel rather helpless. She clearly had the ability of an assassin, so why did she become a berserker? Then, Master, what do you need me to do? Do you want me to cast Sky Strike? Giliel asked as she floated around Wyrm. There's no need for that. Besides, even if it's you, I'm afraid you won't be able to cause any damage to the holy city. Wyrm did not ridicule Giliel for wanting to cast Skystrike right from the start. He shook his head rather seriously. See here. Wyrm then zoomed in on the map on the magic screen, shifted his position, and used his finger to point at the interior of the holy city. As Abant was high above the holy city, logically speaking, from the image that Abant provided, he should be able to see the entire interior of the holy city. But, I can't see the interior. Giliel was slightly surprised. Yes, from the image directly above, one could not see, or rather, could not clearly see the interior of the holy city. The holy city below was clearly just a city, but in the image, the interior of the holy city was filled with a mosaic-like light film. The light blocked the view of the interior, and from the ground, due to the height of the holy city's walls, it was still impossible to see the interior. This should be the defense formed by Artoria's holy spear. Not only can it defend against aerial attacks, it can also block detection, Wyrm explained to Giliel. Artoria? Master sounds so familiar. Could it be that he's someone Mostet knows? Giliel teased Wyrm in an ambiguous tone, as if she could tell that Wyrm had special feelings for that, Artoria. Bang! Ouch! Giliel hugged her head and floated around in the control room, trying to relieve the pain. Wyrm silently put down his fist, and without even looking at Giliel, he got down to business. Abant, can you detect Azrael's magic power? Wyrm, who could not see the interior of the holy city, could not determine whether Azrael and Gadazi had entered the holy city, so Wyrm wanted Abant to detect Azrael's magic power. As someone who was familiar with Azrael, Abant must have a way. Abant did not respond, but a progress bar appeared on the big screen. The progress bar ended, and the map of the holy city, including the surroundings of the holy city, reappeared before Wyrm. On this map, the location of the city gate and the north were marked with blue marks. It was Azrael's magic power that Abanti had detected, and Abanti had presented it to nothingness as a blue mark. It seemed that Azrael had gone to the north. However, this was not the only thing Wyrm was concerned about. This is the trace of a battle. Chapter 728. Wasn't it obvious? Wyrm ordered Azrael to secretly follow Gadazi and the others. She would not appear unless it was absolutely necessary. However, Abant detected a lot of Azrael's magic power. Wasn't it obvious that Azrael had fought? And Wyrm felt that the magic power left behind was more like a mark left by Azrael than a trace of a battle. It was normal for a servant to leave behind magic power from a battle. Therefore, Gawain did not deliberately remove the residual magic power. And Gawain's inaction left Azrael's mark behind. The magic power left by Azrael extended all the way to the north. In other words, Gadazi and the others retreated to the north. Could it be that Tachika and the others just happened to encounter the Saint-Elect? Wyrm guessed. As the emissary who wanted to see the Lion King, Gadazi and the others would not have a conflict for no reason. And the only thing that could make Gadazi and the others have a conflict with the holy city was the Saint-Elect. After all, Artoria was not an unreasonable person. Even if she was deified by the Holy Lance and became the goddess Lungaminiad, if Gadazi and the others asked for an audience, Artoria would most likely agree. Even if it was because of Chaldea's action of saving the 5 singularities, when Gadazi and the others asked for an audience, Artoria would agree to see them. Wyrm estimated that when Gadazi and the others came here, the Saint-Elect happened to be at the gate of the holy city. Gadazi and the others could not bear to see the refugees who were not selected to be slaughtered, so they intervened to stop the Saint-Elect from going on. However, it was not correct to say that they stopped it. It should be said that they obstructed it. Because Gadazi and the others did not have the strength to fight against Gawain. Not to mention Da Vinci, in the face of the Knights of the Round Table, the immature Matthew could only protect his master, and Azrael was also ordered by Wyrm to not show up easily. And their opponent, Gawain, the gatekeeper of the holy city, Wyrm guessed that he must have received the blessing from the Lion King, just like Tristan. However, even if Gawain did not receive the blessing, Gadotsi and the others could not deal with him. And with Wu Ming's understanding of Gadotsi, after seeing the refugees being slaughtered, she would definitely intervene. She knew that it was impossible, but as long as it was the right thing to do, she would still do it. This was the spirit of the last master of Chaldea, Fujimaru Rika. It was this precious spirit that made all the servants who met Gadotsi were willing to work for her. In fact, to put it simply, Gadotsi had the charisma to attract servants. In this singularity, Wu Ming did not encounter any servants who were alone. So, Wu Ming did not know if there would be anyone other than Azrael to help Gadotsi. Wu Ming would think of the worst-case scenario. Gadotsi was no match for Gawain, and under Azrael's cover, she fled with some of the refugees. As for why they didn't escape with all the refugees, Wu Ming had underestimated Gadotsi. They really didn't have the ability to do so. At most, they could only bring a portion of the refugees away. Even with Azrael, it wouldn't be enough. After all, their number was too small, and it was simply impossible to cover all the refugees. Putting this aside for the time being, Wu Ming had discovered that something was wrong. According to Azrael's remaining battle magic, the direction of escape was the north. Logically speaking, if Gadotsi wanted to escape, she would not escape to the north. After all, Wu Ming was her strongest backing, so she should escape to the west where Wu Ming was. And being forced to retreat to the north did not make sense. With Azrael's cover, Gadotsi was fully capable of moving toward Wu Ming. There was no need for her to go to the unfamiliar north. But Gadotsi still chose to lead the refugees to the north under all kinds of unfavorable circumstances. So, there was only one possibility. Someone suggested that they go to the north. And who was this person? Wu Ming guessed that it was most likely Hassan. It was very likely that Gadotsi and the others came to the holy city to meet the Lion King, but they saw the solemn knight slaughtering the unselected refugees at the end of the holy selection. This made Gadotsi and the others stop them. And it just so happened that Hassan was around. However, Hassan was an assassin and did not have much combat strength. Therefore, under Azrael's cover, Hassan proposed to transfer these refugees to the mountains in the north. That was Hassan's territory, and the villages there were extremely difficult to find, so it was suitable for these refugees. As for why Hassan came to the holy city, it was easy to guess. Hassan had reasons such as, wanted to sneak into the holy city to assassinate the Lion King through the holy selection, learned from the refugees rescued by Wu Ming that the holy selection slaughtered the unselected refugees in order to save them, and happened to meet him while collecting information. In short, there were many ways to explain why Hassan appeared here. However, Wu Ming did not know which Hassan met with Gadotsi and the others. However, Wu Ming felt that there was a high possibility that it was the smoke-drunk Hassan whom he saved. Why? It was because she was the one who brought back the refugees who knew the truth about the holy selection. Wu Ming could be sure that there was more than one Hassan on his back, but Wu Ming was not sure if these Hassans could communicate with each other. Even Wu Ming knew that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. In order to avoid the pursuit of the holy city, those Hassans would not have arranged their existences together. If they could not communicate normally, then the Hassan who came here to help Gadotsi and the others was most likely the smoke-drunk Hassan. However, there were exceptions to everything. These were just Wu Ming's guesses. However, one thing was clear. Gadotsi and the others were not in the holy city. Instead, they went to the mountains in the north with Azrael. In this way, there was no need for Wu Ming to continue staying here. With this thought in mind, Wu Ming nodded to himself and then spoke to Abent. Abent, follow the magic power left behind by Azrael and head north. Wu Ming was not prepared to meet with Artoria and the Knights of the Round Table now. The most important thing now was to find Gadotsi and hand over the Holy Grail to Chaldea. However, Abent did not know what Wu Ming was thinking, and neither did Gabriel. Gabriel only knew that she, Wu Ming, and Abent had just arrived here and were about to leave. Hey. Master, are you leaving now? Don't you want to stay a little longer? Gabriel said coquettishly. No, let's find Azrael and the others first. Hey, why are you doing this? Gabriel looked unhappy. Then, Wyrm once again raised his fist. This caused Gabriel's unhappy face to instantly turn into a happy one. Compared to Gabriel's displeasure, Abbott was much more obedient. If his master said he was leaving, then he would leave. However, Wyrm came so ostentatiously and wanted to leave so simply. It would not be so easy. That was because Gawain had already reported to Agrippin, and Agrippin had already woken up the Lion King who often slept. Chapter 729. On the tallest spire in the center of the holy city, the Lion King stood alone on an open platform with the holy spear in her hand. Her eyes glowing with golden divinity, Artoria looked at the floating tree in the sky that had begun to move toward the north. Villo. Artoria muttered Wyrm's name as she looked at the floating tree. In the holy city, Gawain returned to the gate of the holy city. He had already reported to Egwene, and Egwene said that he had already awakened the king when the enemy appeared. The king also said that he would attack the third party that provoked the holy city. After that, Gawain returned to the gate of the holy city after Egwene gave him a few more instructions. Gawain was determined to be the king's tool, so without Artoria's instructions, Gawain would not do anything else. What he needed to do next was to continue the holy purification and clean up the humans who were not qualified. Continue the holy purification, Knights of Solemnity in position. Following Gawain's order, the Knights of Solemnity surrounded the refugees again. The refugees' faces turned from joy to horror as they began the massacre. Ignoring the refugees' screams, Gawain turned around. None of them are qualified. Recalling what Egwene told him, Gawain shook his head. He said that it was the king who told him to immediately carry out the holy purification. Although he did not know why it was so urgent, as a tool, Gawain chose to follow the order. Seeing that most of the refugees had been killed, Gawain shook his head and entered the holy city. Looks like there aren't many people who are qualified to enter the holy city. The Knights of Solemnity would take care of the remaining traces. In the sky, in Abante's monitoring room. Wyrm naturally saw the scene of the refugees being slaughtered, but there was nothing he could do. Because Wyrm found that Artoria had locked onto him. Although Abante could not detect the holy city, Wyrm, who had a special connection with Artoria, could feel that he had been locked onto by the holy spear. Artoria did not allow Wyrm to interfere with the holy purification because she wanted to prove her determination to Wyrm. And Wyrm was not a saint, so he would not risk being attacked by the holy spear to save the refugees. Previously, he had only done what he could to save those refugees at the gates of the holy city. The reason why he saved the refugees from Tristan's hands was also because it was within his capabilities. Of course, there was also the matter of face. Those refugees were saved by him, so if they were killed in front of Silent Wonder, then Silent Wonder would lose face. This time, however, it was different. Abante was high up in the sky, far from the ground. Furthermore, Lungo Minyat had locked onto him. This was a ceremony to prove Artoria's decision to Wyrm. If Wyrm messed up, Artoria wouldn't be polite. More importantly, if Wyrm made a move, he might have a falling out with Artoria. If Silent Wonder had been summoned normally as Varen, then as a knight, he would have been influenced by the spirit base to prevent the refugees from being massacred, but it was a pity. Wyrm added his main body's authority to this spirit base, summoning the Skywing species and Abante. This spirit base was no longer a pure British silver dragon, Varos Cyrus Ed, but the dominant one was the origin dragon, Wyrm. Even though the two of them were the same person, Abante, speed up and continue to move north, Wyrm urged Abante. Wyrm, who had never been to the north, could not use the portal, so he could only use Abante as a vehicle to move. Abban sped up and headed north without stopping. Wyrm opened the portal and walked in. After walking out of the portal, Wyrm arrived outside of Abante. Wyrm silently looked at the tallest tower in the center of the holy city below. It was strange, as if Artoria had removed the shield. Wyrm saw Artoria standing at the top of the tallest tower in the holy city. Artoria also raised her head and looked at Wyrm. Neither of them spoke. Wyrm read some of Artoria's thoughts from her eyes. Artoria's determination showed that she would save people in her own way. Even Wu Ming could not change her mind. However, Wu Ming just smiled. He did not think that the first Hassan was wrong. He would definitely come back to save Artoria, who was deeply deified. He waved his hand again, and the black and purple ripples swallowed Wu Ming. Abante, who was moving north, had also moved a large distance. He was almost out of the sky around the holy city. The two met again, and it ended abruptly. Lord Vero. My king. Guinevere was hiding behind one of the buildings on the platform where Artoria was. He was muttering Wu Ming and Artoria's names. Let's go back, Guinevere. Artoria's sudden voice startled Guinevere. Yes. Yes. On the other side, Aguawan, who was in the tower of the holy city, saw the floating tree safely leave. He could not help but frown. His king promised him to destroy the enemy, and he did not keep his promise. However, even if his king did not keep his promise, he would not be dissatisfied. It was not something he should think about. Shaking his head silently, Aguawan went to welcome Artoria's return. What he needed to do was to eliminate all the enemies, and then sacrifice them all for the sake of his king's great cause. That was all. On Abante's side, Wu Ming was sitting on the sofa, thinking about the next step of his plan. Artoria had really changed. She was not the kind of person who would do things her own way. As long as someone advised her to do something, she would think about it and ask for more. However, this meeting between Wu Ming and Artoria made Wu Ming see that Artoria, as King Wu Ming, was not determined because she had become the goddess Lungaminiad. In short, she was on the wrong path. For people who were on the wrong path, what they needed was to be pulled up. According to First Hassan, saving the Lion King would not only require Wu Ming's power, but also the power of the silver arm. If I'm not wrong, Bedivere must be in this singularity. However, it was not easy to find someone who could move in a sea of people. It was wiser to meet up with Gadatsi and the others. At this time, Abante gave Wu Ming a hint. On the magic screen provided by Abante, Wu Ming saw a team of knights with the symbol of the holy city's Lion King. The leader was one of the Knights of the Round Table that Wu Ming was familiar with. Lancelot. Chapter 730. That's right, the leading knight was a knight in purple armor, and this knight was Lancelot. What's wrong? Master, do you know that knight? Giliel heard Wu Ming's muttering and moved her head closer. Yes, I do know him. Wu Ming nodded, but his expression was a little awkward. Lancelot was indeed a very upright person. He was recognized as the #1 knight under Artoria other than Wu Ming. As for why Wu Ming had to be excluded, it was because the other knights thought that Wu Ming was simply a monster and could not be included in the ranks of comparison. But that was not the main point. The main point was that Lancelot actually liked Guinevere. Guinevere liked Wu Ming, and compared to Guinevere, Wu Ming liked Artoria more. Artoria took the initiative to distance herself from Wu Ming because of the king for the people reason. This relationship was like a third-rate idol drama, which made Wu Ming feel quite helpless. Of course, Lancelot liked Guinevere when the timeline was correct. King Arthur's story had Silence involvement, and it was very likely that a lot of changes had taken place. The story of The Long March to Seize the Bull and The Epic of Gilgamesh also had a butterfly effect because of Wu Ming's intrusion. It was already different from the original that Wu Ming knew. But one thing was certain. Wu Ming had read the story of King Arthur in the world of the War of the 14 Knights, and also read the story of the deceased King Arthur in the world of Mayu and Ilia. In the story, Lancelot did not exactly show his love for Guinevere. What did this mean? This meant that every world was affected by Wu Ming. It turned out that although it was a parallel world, because of Wu Ming's special identity, as long as Wu Ming made an impact on history in a parallel world, there would be stories of Wu Ming in every parallel world because of Wu Ming's special identity. But this did not mean that countless Wu Ming had experienced an adventure in every parallel world. In Wu Ming's view, it was more like a copy and paste between worlds. Take for example. The Gilgamesh that Wu Ming met was obviously the female version, but the male version was also quite familiar with Wu Ming, and Wu Ming was also very familiar with the male version of Gilgamesh as if they had lived and experienced together. Therefore, Wu Ming wasn't unfamiliar with the male version of Gilgamesh, and Wu Ming wasn't unfamiliar to the male version of Gilgamesh either. It was as though Wu Ming was the male version of Gilgamesh's Hyunryong. But Wu Ming didn't experience it with the male version of Gilgamesh. In other words, all the Wu Ming in the parallel worlds had become one person, just like Zelik. And the story that Wu Ming participated in was no longer the story that Wu Ming knew from the beginning of the ordinary world. At the end of King Arthur's story, Guinevere was burned at the stake after Morgan Le Fay's scheme failed and revealed the fact that she loved Wu Ming. In the end, Lancelot robbed the execution ground in the name of loving Guinevere. But Guinevere had also told Wu Ming with certainty that nothing happened between her and Lancelot. Wu Ming could see that Guinevere didn't lie to him. As a reader who had read the King Arthur's legend without Vilo their answered, Wu Ming knew that the reason why Lancelot fell in love with Guinevere was because during the process of being Guinevere's knight, both of them gradually developed a spiritual love because of King Arthur's sigh. And Guinevere's knight became Wu Ming, so Lancelot shouldn't have fallen in love with Guinevere anymore. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't need to feel awkward. After all, nothing happened between him and Guinevere. Master, I feel that you and this guy named Lancelot don't have a good relationship. Jillian looked back and forth between Wu Ming and Lancelot on the big screen as if she really saw some clues. Then, Jillian was warned by Wu Ming's iron fist. No matter what, let's meet Lancelot first. Seeing that Lancelot's direction wasn't the holy city, Wu Ming was curious. There were no houses to live in there, only a large mound. It was impossible for the people of the mountain to live there. So, what did Lancelot go to do? Wu Ming let Abin continue to head north. Although he was a little worried about Jillian staying in Abin's body alone, Jillian, who had been given the Vitality incarnation, wouldn't make Wu Ming worry. Then, Wu Ming opened the portal connecting to the ground and walked in. Hee Abin, let me see why Master went to find Lancelot. As soon as Wu Ming left, Jillian stopped covering her head and flew to the big screen excitedly. However, the big screen that was playing Lancelot suddenly turned black. Hey! Why is it like this, Abin? Jillian shouted regretfully. Then, a line of words appeared on the big screen. Hey! What's this? Jillian curiously went up. If I knew you would peep at me, I would have let Abin cut off the image when you came over. Just wait for another bump on your head. Sigh. Jillian was stunned. Then, Jillian's sorrowful voice was heard. Hey. On the ground, in the shadow of a mound, a dark purple ripple opened and Wu Ming walked out. Was that Jillian's scream just now? Wu Ming smiled as he looked at the teleportation gate that was almost closed. She's really dishonest. Shaking his head, Wu Ming stopped thinking about Jillian. The mound that Wu Ming chose was a mound that Abin had detected that Lancelot's troops had to pass through. Presumably, Lancelot would arrive soon. Wu Ming looked at his clothes. Before that, I should change into a knight's armor. As Wu Ming spoke, magic power surged and covered Wu Ming's entire body, including his head. A few seconds later, a handsome silver-white knight wearing armor and a cloak appeared. Now, all I need to do is wait. After saying that, Wu Ming casually sat cross-legged and waited quietly. After a few minutes, Lancelot's troops, which were not moving very quickly, arrived. As Wu Ming was sitting in the shadow of the mound, ordinary knights would not be able to see him clearly from afar. However, with Lancelot's eyesight, he could naturally see him clearly. Everyone, stop advancing and rest. Lancelot's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately issued an order to the troops behind him. Then, he rode his horse towards Wu Ming's location. Chapter 731. The horse's speed was not fast, so Lancelot gave up halfway through the ride. Lancelot agilely jumped down from the horse and ran towards Wu Ming's direction. The black horse that was abandoned by Lancelot stopped and stayed where it was. Lancelot came to a position a few meters in front of Wu Ming. Lancelot, who was dizzy with joy, calmed down. You. Lancelot didn't know what to say for a moment. It was as if his voice recorder was stuck. What, don't you recognize me, Lancelot? Wyrm, who was sitting cross-legged, looked at Lancelot and took off his helmet. The helmet turned into magic power and disappeared with the wind like sand. Then, Wyrm's face, which was rather familiar to Lancelot, appeared. Sir Villo, it's really you. Lancelot instantly became agitated, but immediately after, Lancelot put on a sorrowful look. If you came a little earlier, how good would that be? Lancelot's tone was full of helplessness. Are you referring to the matters regarding our king? Although the relationship between Wyrm and Artoria was known by Guinevere, and the other Knights of the Round Table also saw some clues, but in front of the Knights of the Round Table, Wyrm still called Artoria, our king. Yes, Sir Villo, if you came a little earlier, maybe you could save our king. Lancelot nodded. Regarding this point, Silent Wonder admitted that he and Lancelot had the same thoughts. If he came here a little earlier, Artoria wouldn't have become like this, assimilated by the goddess. But it's not too late now. After the first Hassan reminded Wyrm also understood that he could still save Artoria with his own strength and the silver arm. By the way, Lancelot, you look a little different from Gao Wenqing and the others. Wyrm looked at Lancelot meaningfully. Of course, Wyrm was referring to Lancelot's attitude towards Artoria. The other knights were all loyal to Artoria. No matter what happened to Artoria, they would not feel sad about it. But Lancelot was very sad because of the change of the king, and this sadness burst out when he saw Wyrm. You're right, Sir Villo, I feel sad about it. Lancelot nodded. Our king's current approach is not right. I wanted to stand on the opposite side of our king and fight our king with Guy. Lancelot said as if he was reminiscing. However, only you, Lord Wyrm, can save our king. This is what Kai, Lamarck, Gaholis, and the others who stand against our king all agree on. Lancelot closed his eyes as he spoke. Hearing Lancelot's words, Wyrm recalled the faces of Guy and the others. Just like how Wyrm was familiar with them, they were also familiar with Wyrm. They believed that the Lion King could be saved by Wyrm. I'm a sinner. I betrayed our king, and I don't want to betray him again. So, like Gawain, I chose to stand on the side of our king and become a knight who will listen to our king. But Lancelot opened his eyes, which were filled with sadness and pain. I don't want to see our king go down the wrong path. I don't want to see our queen cry. I don't want to see Camelot die. Don't want to see our queen cry. Hearing this, Wyrm was a bit surprised. It seemed that Lancelot still had some yearning for Guinevere. Guy and the others understood the pain in my heart. They understood me and entrusted the important task of finding you to me. After that, I volunteered to become a ranger knight, hoping to find you in advance. Lancelot did not believe that Wyrm, as a knight of the Round Table, would not be summoned. Lancelot believed that, just like Galahad and Bedivere, Wyrm must have been summoned to another place in this area because of some unforeseen circumstances. Heaven did not disappoint the faithful. He, Lancelot, finally found Wyrm today. I finally found you, Sir Villo. Lancelot looked at Wyrm with hope and excitement. However, Wyrm did not care much about Lancelot's excitement. I say, Lancelot, it must not feel good to kill a friend. Wyrm turned his head to the distance and looked at the scenery in the distance. Lancelot was silent. How could it feel good? Whether it was Tristan, Gawain, Mordred, or Lancelot, although they were all on the king's side, the matter of killing a comrade was still a knot in their hearts. Even the most cold-hearted and seemingly most loyal to the king, a gull, who was not important to the king, had a slight fluctuation in his heart. After all, they were comrades who had fought together for more than a decade. Even if he knew that they had all become heroic spirits and descended in the form of servants, how could he just kill them? The pain and sin of killing a comrade with his own hands would not disappear. Presumably, Guy and the others also thought the same. Not only did they have to brandish their swords at their own compatriots, but they also had to attack the king they were loyal to. How much condemnation did they have to make such a decision? Seeing that Lancelot did not say anything, Wyrm spoke. I have been to the holy city and met the king and queen. Gawain also told me about you. Lancelot was stunned, then his eyes became gloomy. With Gawain's personality, he must have told Wyrm everything. The villain must be very disappointed in us. Not only did we not stop the king, but we also killed our own. The thing that left the deepest impression on me was that Gawain told me about Gareth. Lancelot's expression became even gloomier. Whether it was the accidental killing of Gareth in his previous life or the guilt of not being able to kill Gareth in this life, Lancelot's heart was painful. That child is still as innocent as ever, just like Galahad. Wyrm said with nostalgia. Wyrm did not have the slightest sadness or anger, as if he was talking about an ordinary matter. Don't stand, sit down and talk. Wyrm said to Lancelot with a smile. Lancelot was puzzled by Wyrm's emotions. Why was he always so calm? But in the end, Lancelot sat down beside Wyrm. Every knight of the Round Table is a good person. Guy and the others chose to stand against Artoria, and you chose to be completely loyal to Artoria. Wyrm did not add the honorific Ching, nor did he address Artoria as queen. The tone of his communication with Lancelot also changed from colleague to friend. Whether it is you or them, you all acted for your own beliefs. I don't think there is anything to be sad about. Chapter 732. Lancelot listened quietly and did not interrupt. In order to prevent Artoria from going astray, they stood against her. In order to make up for the mistakes of your past life, you stood on Artoria's side. Even if you betrayed the king you served, even if you killed your own people, it was a choice you made based on your own beliefs, and you worked hard to live for it. Wyrm paused for a moment, then looked at Lancelot. This result may be sad in the eyes of others, but in my opinion, as a knight of the Round Table, this is not something to be sad about. Lord Vilo. Lancelot looked at Wyrm blankly. Take Gareth for example. She believed that the king was right, and she thought the same when she left. However, her pure spirit, which was not weaker than Galahad's, could not bear the inner condemnation of killing her own people, so she chose a suitable time to voluntarily leave. In my opinion, Gareth did a good job. Take you for example. In order to find me, you endured the pain of killing your own people. Take Artoria for example. She proved her will to me, and I witnessed Artoria's proof. For this, a group of refugees died in front of me. This sentence shocked Lancelot. As someone who knew Wyrm well, he knew that Wyrm would not be stingy to help those who could be saved. Then, Wyrm's eyes became firm. However, if I had to do it again, I would still choose to stand by and do nothing. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world, and there was no such thing as a free lunch. There was no such thing as a free lunch. In order to stop Artoria, Guy and the others were filled with condemnation. In order to protect Artoria, Lancelot and the others were stained with the blood of their own people. In order to protect humans, Artoria chose to turn them into specimens and bear the pain of others' incomprehension. In order to be loyal to Artoria, Gareth chose to be stained with the blood of his own people and had a nervous breakdown. In order to bear witness to Artoria's decision, Wyrm did not save them, which went against his usual style. The price was light, and the result was the same. There is no need to be sad about the past. Even if this sadness was caused by us, no matter what, this is the choice of the Knights of the Round Table. All we need to do is to look forward. Wyrm wouldn't be immersed in the past. This was his way of survival as the origin dragon. This was also why Wyrm's heart hadn't aged and was forever filled with the vigor of a youth. Because his heart was looking forward. Lancelot fell into silence. Wyrm was right. It was because of his hesitation, because he was immersed in the guilt of betraying his king in the past, that he decided to be completely loyal to Artoria in this life. It was because Gawain felt guilty that his dissatisfaction with Lancelot had led to the Battle of Camlan, which ultimately led to the fall of Arthur's dynasty. That was why Gawain chose to be completely loyal to Artoria and become a tool without thinking. Tristan had hurt Artoria because of his words when she was alive. In order to make up for it, he also decided to be completely loyal to Artoria. It was the same for everyone. Because they wanted to make up for something, they chose to stand in their original position and wanted to do better. If we all let go of the past, will we be able to pull our king back from the wrong path? Lancelot said thoughtfully. However, they had already come this far. Just like Wyrm said, they shouldn't be immersed in the past. They had to look forward. In short, I have found a way to save Artoria. Don't worry, leave it to me, Lancelot. Wyrm said with a smile and extended his hand to Lancelot. Lancelot was stunned, then shook Wyrm's hand. Yes, I'm counting on you, Lord Varro. This was a promise between friends. Lancelot chose to believe in Wyrm. Then, Lord Villo, what do you want to do next? Do you need to go to my camp to prepare? Lancelot stood up and asked respectfully. Now that the conversation between friends had ended, Lancelot also added a respectful title to Wyrm. You have a camp outside the holy city. Wyrm was stunned. Was Lancelot not going to return to the holy city to stay? Because I was anxious to find you, I have applied to stay outside for a long time. My king also agreed to my application, so I have my own camp, Lancelot explained. Since you have a camp, then let's go take a look. So, Wyrm joined Lancelot's team and set off together. In Abanti's body, Giliel had stopped Abanti's actions. Abanti had brought her to the sky above the northern mountains. Next, she needed Wyrm's instructions. So slow, master. Giliel said in boredom as she rolled around in the air. However, at this moment, Wyrm was already on the way to Lancelot's camp. Wyrm rode a magically created horse and walked side by side with Lancelot at the front of the team. By the way, Mordred is also a gorilla knight, right? Does she also have her own camp outside the holy city? Wyrm asked curiously. No. Mordred's words are a little special. Lancelot's expression became subtle when talking about Mordred. My king did not prepare a residence for Mordred in the holy city, but Mordred should not have a residence outside. Due to Mordred's personality, she did not have a fixed residence. Moreover, she did not bring many knights with her. It could be said that compared to Lancelot, Mordred was a true gorilla knight. As expected of her. Wyrm's mouth twitched slightly. By the way, does Lord Villo know about Chaldea? Lancelot suddenly asked. Oh, are you talking about the last master? Wyrm had a smile on his face. As expected, you know about the existence of Chaldea. Lancelot nodded and began his explanation. Yesterday, the master of Chaldea and the mountain folk in the north fled to the northern mountains with a group of St. Bard refugees. I happened to be nearby and was ordered to pursue them by agronomy. Guerrilla knights seemed to be a noble title, but in fact, they were scouts and vanguards. To put it bluntly, if something happened, they would be the first to go up to the holy city. The reason why Tristan was often sent out by agronomy was because of the instability of the guerrilla knights. After all, if you were here today, you might be there tomorrow. You really pursued them? Wyrm looked at Lancelot with a strange and subtle expression. After all, Matthew, who was possessed by Galahad, was among them. Chapter 733. Actually, they didn't. Lancelot shook his head and continued. When I caught up with them, they were already at the edge of the mountain. Immediately after, Lancelot explained to Wyrm. Because Lancelot did not want to catch Chaldea's people, he went easy on them a little. In Lancelot's opinion, it was not a big deal at all. As a result, most of the refugees entered the mountain. Most of the refugees had already entered the mountain, but when Lancelot caught up with Gadazzi and the others, there were still many refugees who did not enter the mountain. Gadazzi and the others, who were at the back, did not enter the mountain either. Just as Lancelot was about to take down Gadazzi and the others and take this opportunity to show his goodwill, someone appeared to stop him. A green-haired girl with angel wings came from the direction of the holy city and attacked me. Hearing Lancelot's words, Wyrm's expression became slightly subtle. Unsurprisingly, the green-haired girl was Azriel. Because Lancelot received the news that the refugees were intercepted halfway, he did not know what happened in the holy city, so he was very surprised by the green-haired girl's arrival. That was a servant. I could clearly sense it. Lancelot's expression became serious. That servant is not weaker than me. If we continue to fight, the possibility of me losing is very high. It was normal for Lancelot to think that he was no match for Azriel. Putting aside Azriel's age and combat experience, the Skywing race was a fighting race, a god-slaying weapon. In a melee, Lancelot might not be able to gain an advantage over Azriel. Moreover, Azriel was a mage. A sky strike was enough to make Lancelot suffer, not to mention other kinds of magic. I really did not expect that the Master of Chaldea would have such a strong person protecting him. Because of my fight with the green-haired girl, the Master of Chaldea took the opportunity to enter the mountain. After Lancelot finished speaking, he looked at Wyrm. He felt that Wyrm seemed to have something to say from the start. Sir Villo, do you have something to say? Lancelot asked, puzzled. No, a little bit. Wyrm shook his head, then paused and nodded. It's better not to explain too much to Lancelot. Of course, this didn't mean that Wyrm was prepared to hide everything. He would still tell Wyrm about his relationship with Chaldea. By the way, Lancelot, do you know that I'm actually quite close to Chaldea? Wyrm's revelation made Lancelot's eyes widen. Really? Lord Villo, you've already established a good relationship with the Master of Chaldea. It seems like my actions were unnecessary. Lancelot shook his head in self-mockery. Wyrm wasn't bothered by Lancelot's self-mockery. Then, Wyrm continued. You should know that Galahad is the servant of Master Chaldea. Nay. Suddenly, the black horse under Lancelot let out a blood-curdling screech. Wyrm looked over and saw that Lancelot's body had tensed up. This made Lancelot's legs exert a lot of strength. The powerful leg force caused a lot of pressure on the black horse's abdomen, causing the black horse to neigh. Hey! Sir Lancelot, your mount can't stand your strength. Be careful. Wyrm immediately reminded. I'm sorry, Sir Villo, I've made a fool of myself. Lancelot's tensed body immediately relaxed. The former, I'm sorry, was said to his mount, and the latter was said to Wyrm. Although it couldn't be compared to his mount when he was alive, this black horse had accompanied Lancelot for a long time. Lancelot also had some feelings for this black horse. Look at you. You don't seem to know that Galahad is the servant of Master Chaldea. Wyrm's words made Lancelot feel awkward. I really don't know. Lancelot replied rather awkwardly. Although Lancelot had caught up with Gadotzi and the others, because of Azriel's interception, Lancelot didn't really meet with Gadotzi and even Matthew. He also didn't know that the person Galahad possessed was Matthew. Now that Wyrm said this, Lancelot was shocked. That. Sir Villo, although I didn't have close contact with Master Chaldea, I saw Chaldea's group in the distance. It seems that my son isn't among them, this was true. Lancelot had caught up with Gadotzi and the others. Although he didn't do anything, Lancelot glanced at Chaldea's group from a distance. However, because the distance was too far, Lancelot couldn't effectively perceive Galahad's aura, and Lancelot didn't find his son, so he didn't pay attention. It's normal that you didn't notice because Galahad had given its power to a girl and then fell into a deep sleep. I see. Is it a demi-servant? Lancelot nodded. After all, he was also a regular servant. He still understood the operation of possessing others and falling into a deep sleep after handing over power. But, Lancelot, you don't seem to know anything. Wyrm cast a strange look at Lancelot. Just from the fact that Lancelot didn't know that Wyrm had been to the Holy City, it was enough to see that Lancelot's information was slightly outdated, not to mention that Lancelot also had a lot of mistakes in other aspects. This can't be helped. Lancelot smiled helplessly and shook his head. After all, a Grumman doesn't like me very much. Compared to the betrayal of others, in a Grumman's eyes, Lancelot's betrayal was more shameful, so he was quite displeased with Lancelot. Not to mention that Lancelot himself also asked to stay outside the holy city, which was what a Grumman wanted. In other information, a Grumman even deliberately withheld information and deliberately didn't tell Lancelot. Just like Wu Ming's matter, a Grumman deliberately didn't tell Lancelot. After all, Lancelot, as a guerrilla knight, ran around all day and basically didn't need any information, so a Grumman simply chose not to tell Lancelot. The order to intercept Gadotsi and the others was given to him by a Gwaun when he found out that Lancelot was in the vicinity of the holy city, and he chose to attack. Before that, Lancelot didn't even know that Chaldea's people had come here. He only knew that Chaldea would come. You are really pitiful. Wu Ming helplessly shook his head. I don't feel pitiful, a Grumman doing this, I also feel that I am peaceful. After all, there were no complicated orders, which was also beneficial for Lancelot to find Wu Ming. Although now he found him, and also found his son. Wait a minute. Lancelot stopped the horse. My son seems to have become a daughter. Chapter 734. That's true, but whether the other party recognizes you as his father or not is another matter. Wu Ming attacked mercilessly. Wu Ming was not very familiar with Matthew, but he was not a stranger either. In Wu Ming's opinion, Matthew was not the kind of child who would casually recognize others as his father, but this was not certain. After all, Matthew's spirit base belonged to Galahad, and refugees would be affected. Lancelot fell into a deep silence. Unlike Wu Ming, Lancelot thought that he had a good relationship with Galahad. But because of this, Lancelot could clearly realize that Galahad was actually very strict with him as a father. When the king went astray, he did not intervene in time. Instead, he let the king go and even joined the king on the wrong path. With what he was doing now, he was afraid that Galahad would not recognize him. After all, Galahad had obtained the Holy Grail and was known as the Holy Grail Knight. Even if there were other secrets, it could not cover up Lancelot's mistake. Even if Matthew was not the real Galahad and was only possessed by Galahad, Galahad's feelings for him were likely to affect Matthew. Therefore, in Lancelot's opinion, his daughter, son, might be quite angry, and it was also very likely that they would not recognize him as their father. Don't be so negative. If you admit your mistake, I think Galahad, or Matthew, will forgive you. Wu Ming smiled and patted Lancelot on the shoulder. However, Lancelot just sighed and lowered his head helplessly. I hope so. During this conversation, they almost reached Lancelot's base. This place is very remote. Looking at the house with a sharp corner surrounded by the hills in front of him, Wu Ming, who was walking all the way, commented. When I was looking for you in the wilderness, I accidentally found this secluded place, Lancelot explained. But there was one thing that Wu Ming was quite puzzled. This shouldn't be your base outside the holy city, right? Wu Ming didn't mean anything else. He just felt that this place didn't look like a base for the external knights of the holy city. Even if it wasn't on the plains, it had to be built in a terrain that fit the style of a knight. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get past a Gwaun. Words like, you're not fit to be my king's knight, it's not proper to be an outpost of the holy city in such a secluded place, and so on would definitely be used by a Gwaun. If it was a Gwaun, he would definitely say something like that. Moreover, he would be suspected of targeting Lancelot. That was why Wu Ming said that this place didn't look like an outpost of the holy city, but more like a hidden secret base. Is that what you want to say, Lord Villo? Wu Ming nodded. There was no other reason other than this place was too advantageous as a secret base. Indeed, this is not where my troops are stationed, Lancelot explained to Wu Ming. Oh. Could it be that it's really as I guessed? Wu Ming's interest was piqued. Although he was suspicious, it was just a guess. Did he get it right? Lancelot didn't say much. He just nodded slightly and then signaled the knights behind him to go ahead first. The knights behind Lancelot responded and accelerated in unison. They rushed from both sides of Lancelot and Wyrm towards the base that was surrounded by many low hills. After the knights left, Wyrm and Lancelot rode their horses and slowly walked forward. "Lord Villo, as you know, I don't agree with my king's way of doing things," Lancelot began to explain to Wyrm. Lancelot just couldn't betray Artoria again, so he chose to side with her. In other words, it was reasonable that Lancelot disagreed with Artoria's way of doing things. "If I meet refugees in the wild, I'll protect them without the knowledge of the other knights of the Round Table and my king. In front of us is the place where the refugees live." Lancelot was indeed the hesitant Lancelot. Although he chose to side with Artoria, he still chose to do some dirty tricks in private. Of course, it was a dirty trick for the Holy City, but in Wyrm's eyes, Lancelot did a good job. "Good job, Lancelot. If Galahad knows about this, he'll definitely be impressed." Lancelot accepted Wyrm's compliment. "I've been on the wrong path. Even if I were to do it again, I wouldn't do it exactly the same way." Lancelot meant that even if he chose to side with Artoria, he wouldn't kill the refugees unless it was Artoria's order. Compared to Gawain and the others who were rigid, Lancelot was more flexible. As a knight, he couldn't betray Artoria again, but he would save the refugees in private. There was no doubt that Lancelot, who was on the Lion King's side, was cleared up a lot. Of course, Lancelot also had a little selfish motive. In order not to disappoint his son, as a father, Lancelot naturally had to take action. Now that his son had become a daughter, Lancelot believed that he had to work harder. The soul of daughter control, burn. *****, let's go and see this secret base of yours. Ignoring Lancelot's soul of daughter control burning face, Wyrm urged his horse to speed up. Seeing Wyrm speeding up, Lancelot, who realized what was going on, also sped up his horse to catch up with Wyrm. A moment later, the scene of a post-disaster camp appeared in front of Wyrm's eyes. Simple tent-like houses made of unknown materials were arranged in an orderly manner in the valley surrounded by hills. Wyrm could see that these tent-like houses looked simple, but they were quite sturdy. At the very least, they could completely block the rain, snow, and hail. "I've arranged knights to patrol the entrance and the hills. Plus, the terrain here is remote, so it can be used as a shelter for the refugees." Lancelot did a good job. There were patrolling knights around the camp, responsible for security. There were also many ordinary people walking between the tent-like houses. Judging from their clothes, they were indeed refugees. The refugees all had smiles on their faces. Although they were trying to find joy in the midst of hardship, their smiles were not fake. Because it was the Middle East, water was relatively scarce. However, Wyrm unexpectedly saw a rather simple well in the corner. Chapter 735. These refugees found it by accident, Lancelot explained. After all, Lancelot was a knight and not an expert in water conservancy. Naturally, he could not find a water source in this secret base. As natives of the Middle East, although it was not their specialty, these refugees naturally had some ways to find a water source. However, they did not expect there to be a water source here. Therefore, an extremely simple well was created. It had to be said that these refugees were really lucky to be rescued in a chaotic world. Not only did they have a safe place to live, but they also had a water source. As for food, Lancelot would regularly bring his knights to deliver food to the refugees. Although it was easy to attract the attention of the Holy City, it was not a problem to bring a small amount of food if the interval between visits was shortened. Although they did not bring a lot of food each time, the frequency was high. As Lancelot was a guerrilla knight, there was no problem for him to run around every day. Lancelot would come here once every few days to deliver food to the refugees. Sometimes it would be 1 or 2 days, sometimes it would be 2 or 3 days. The refugees had been suffering from hunger before and had scrimped on food. In addition to Lancelot's frequent delivery of food, the refugees did not lack food. At the very least, they had food and shelter. These refugees were very satisfied. Unlike before, they didn't have any food to eat, and they didn't even know when they would die. Lancelot came this time to deliver food to the refugees. However, he happened to meet Wyrm on the way and invited Wyrm to come along. "Thank you for your hard work, Lancelot," Wyrm said to Lancelot without turning his head as he looked at the knights distributing food to the refugees. "Of course not, Sir Villo. I am just atoning for my sins." Lancelot did not feel that it was hard for him. In fact, it was in line with his knight's ethics and his way of survival. "Forget it, as you wish." Wyrm shook his head. After taking a look around the camp, Wyrm said his goodbyes. "After all, I came here because I was interested in hunting." "I have other things to do," Wyrm said. "Sir Villo, are you going to the mountains in the north?" Lancelot asked. "That's right. I'm going to the mountain people's territory to look for Chaldea's master." Wyrm had no doubt that Lancelot had guessed his next move. The Knights of the Round Table were not only outstanding in terms of bravery, but also in terms of intelligence. They would not be able to lead troops into battle. Of course, some of the more special Knights of the Round Table were exceptions. "Lancelot, you'd better continue to be a guerrilla knight. I'll look for you when the time comes." When Wyrm said, "when the time comes," he actually did not know when that time would come. After all, things were always changing. Lancelot could be used like the sky wings as a trump card. "Well then, Sir Villo, I won't see you off. Besides, staying in the same place for a long time isn't the style of a guerrilla knight like me. I'm going to leave as well." Wyrm nodded. He wasn't so pretentious that he needed someone to send him off. "Then, I'll take my leave first. Sir Villo." Just as Wyrm was about to leave, he suddenly heard Lancelot call out to him. "Hm." Wyrm turned to look at Lancelot. As if he did not dare to look Wyrm in the eye, Lancelot silently lowered his head. "The person the Queen likes is you. There's nothing between the Queen and me. If you feel that I've tarnished the Queen's reputation, you can take my life at any time. I won't complain." Lancelot's tone was heavy and self-reproachful. Although Lancelot was trying to save Guinevere, who had almost been burned at the stake, his actions had indeed tarnished Guinevere's reputation. "Don't worry, Lancelot. I don't take this matter to heart." Not only did he trust Lancelot, but he also trusted Guinevere. To be honest, Lancelot had fought side by side with him for many years. He knew Lancelot very well. Lancelot could indeed do such a thing. But the most important thing was that Wyrm believed in Guinevere. Guinevere had been secretly in love with him for many years. Because of Artoria, Guinevere had been enduring until Wyrm left. It wasn't unreasonable for Guinevere to fall for Morgan Le Fay's scheme so easily. Guinevere was madly in love with Wyrm. That kind of madness made Guinevere, a heroic spirit, sublimated. Although Guinevere looked weak when he met Wyrm before, Guinevere appeared as a berserker. Although he couldn't cheat like ruler, Wyrm could still distinguish the ranks. This reminded Wyrm of the berserker Kyoheim he met in the American Singularity. Fortunately, Guinevere's madness was different from Kyoheim's. The different madness allowed Guinevere to gain different abilities from Kyoheim. Guinevere couldn't lie to Wyrm. Although Wyrm didn't know this, Wyrm could see from Guinevere's eyes that Guinevere didn't lie. That was enough. After all, trust was quite important. Of course, this didn't mean that Wyrm didn't believe in Lancelot, but Guinevere was more trustworthy. Moreover, Lancelot, who didn't have much contact with Guinevere, didn't have a good impression of Guinevere. In a joking way, defeated dog Lancelot was a good title. Sigma for all, Lancelot didn't serve as Guinevere's guard knight, and they didn't have a long bond, plus he missed Wyrm. Guinevere's impression of Lancelot in his mind was just a knight loyal to the king and a knight who worshipped Wyrm. "Guinevere has explained it to me. Don't overthink. Just focus on your own things. You should know that Galahad is a singularity. Let's not talk about others, but at the very least, don't disappoint Galahad." "Yes. Villo, Sama, I will remember your words." Lancelot, who was touched by Wu Ming's trust and relationship, was moved by Wu Ming's knight's salute. Then, I'll leave first. After Wu Ming finished, he waved his hand, and a black-purple ripple appeared, engulfing Wu Ming's body, and then disappeared. Looking at the place where Wu Ming disappeared, Lancelot looked serious and said slowly, "Villo, Sama, I will live up to your expectations." Chapter 736. Wu Ming left. After checking the surroundings, Lancelot also left with his troops. This camp was still very safe, so there was no need for too much protection. If they did that, it might even attract attention. This was why Wu Ming didn't take any protective measures against the camp. On the other side, inside Abendheim's body. In the monitoring room that Abend specially built for Wu Ming, Gilliel was lying on her back in boredom, floating in the air like a rootless duckweed. "Master is so slow, why isn't he back yet?" Gilliel said in boredom. Abend had now arrived at the northern mountainous area and had stayed here for quite some time. This gave people the feeling that Wu Ming has been gone for a long time. However, this wasn't the case. After Wu Ming left Abend's body, he landed on the ground and waited for Lancelot to start counting, chatting with Lancelot, following Lancelot to the refugee camp, and finally visiting and staying in the camp. Although this series of events took some time, it definitely wasn't long. At most, it would take 1 or 2 hours. The long time that Gopro mentioned was just her own complaint. However, it was normal for Gilliel to be so bored. Even if it was only half an hour, it was a boring time that was difficult for Gilliel to pass. However, this was the real Gilliel, wasn't it? At this moment, a dark purple portal suddenly appeared beside the sofa, and a person wearing east wind clothing walked out of the ripples. This person was Wu Ming. "Master, you're finally back." Gilliel was like a bird returning to its nest. The wings on her back flapped as she flew toward Wu Ming. "I'm back, Gilliel." Wu Ming first smiled as he answered Gilliel, then spoke again. "After I left, you didn't mess around, did you, Gilliel?" Wu Ming still looked at Gilliel with a smile, but this smile was so cold in Gilliel's eyes. Iciness caused Jillian, who was flying in the air, to stop instantly. Then, Jillian obediently descended from the air. Ha, how could that be? "I'm sure I didn't mess around, Master, you have to believe me." Seeing Wu Ming's clenched fists, Gopril hurriedly explained with a yawn. Wu Ming smiled as he walked up to Gopril and raised his hand. Jillian closed her eyes subconsciously. Then, she felt a palm stroking her head. "Huh." Gopril opened her eyes and coincidentally saw Wu Ming retract his hand from Gopril's head. That's right, Wu Ming was actually stroking Jillian's head. "Seeing that I'm in a good mood, I'll let you off today." After Wu Ming finished speaking, he turned around and sat on the sofa. Gilliel, who had been left in a daze, came to her senses and touched her head uncomfortably. She was not used to Wu Ming being so gentle to her. After all, every time Wu Ming, he would knock on her head. This sudden touch left Gilliel at a loss. Ever since she became Wu Ming's dependent, Gilliel had never considered whether Wu Ming trusted her as a subordinate or the question of her loyalty to Wu Ming. Firstly, she believed in the former master of the Sky Wings, Arthas, and also believed that Arthas was the new master they had found. Secondly, no matter who the master was, as a weapon, she just had to do her job well. Therefore, Gilliel's attitude toward Wu Ming was very casual. Although Wu Ming often knocked on Gilliel's head, that did not mean that Wu Ming hated her. It was just a casual, small punishment. Gilliel naturally understood this, so she did not mind. However, habit was a scary thing. Having gotten used to being knocked on the head, she was not used to the sudden touch. "In any case, I don't have to suffer." Gilliel smiled. After all, Wu Ming was likely to be their master for life if nothing went wrong, so she just had to follow in his footsteps. Gilliel gently flapped her wings and flew behind Wu Ming, looking like she had not learned her lesson. Wu Ming naturally noticed Gilliel's abnormality, but Wu Ming did not do anything. If he did something right, he would be rewarded, and if he did something wrong, he would be punished. If he was in a good mood, Wyrm did not mind giving out extra rewards, such as a pat on the head. If he was in a bad mood, Wyrm did not mind giving out extra punishments, such as a spanking. Perhaps it was this calmness that made Giliel become more and more impudent. Not thinking about this anymore, Wyrm looked at the virtual screen that Abent had brought up again. It showed the scene of the mountainous area below. Abent isn't slow. Wyrm sighed. Wyrm had visually estimated the distance and estimated the time Abent would take, but Abent still gave Wyrm a pleasant surprise. Although his body was rather large, Abent was not like those massive creatures. He still had the advantage of speed. When Wyrm returned, Giliel's bored look indicated that Abent had been here for a while. Although he did not know the exact time, this also meant that Abent was not slow. After all, Abent is a fantasy breed, master. That's a race that's close to God. Abent, who was able to follow Arthu, was one of the best among fantasy breeds, so his speed was naturally not slow. As expected of Abent. Wyrm praised Abent. Then, Abent, can you find a village in these mountainous areas? Wyrm said while looking at the magic screen. Abent was indeed above the mountainous area, but it was not small. Logically speaking, when looking down from the sky, it should be very easy to find the place he wanted to find, not to mention finding a village in the mountainous area. Logically speaking, it should be very conspicuous. However, because Abent was too high up, he could not see the exact situation on the ground. If he shrank it, he would only be able to see the specific situation of a small area. Thus, Wyrm asked Abent if he could find a village in the mountainous area. Wyrm thought that if it really did not work, he would contact Azrael and give it a try. With the contract of the dependent incarnation, Wyrm could naturally contact Azrael, but because he needed to reduce the consumption of magic power, Wyrm closed his connection with the other Skywing breeds, only keeping the identity of master and servant. But before Abent could answer, Giliel answered first. There's no need to go through so much trouble, master. Below where we are now is actually a village. Chapter 737. As if to confirm Gopril's words, Abent activated the magic power virtual screen and continuously shrunk the map below him. Immediately after, a village built on a mountain as if the mountain had been modified appeared in front of Wyrm. Abent's operation was very similar to a real map, which made Wyrm's eyes light up. You're really becoming more and more modern. Well done, Abent. Actually, we were just lucky. When Abent stopped and explored below, we discovered that there was a village below Abent. It's most likely the mountain people that Master is looking for. Gopril answered Wyrm in a rather serious tone, not minding that she used the word, we. If one ignored this sentence and thought about it, it was normal for Abent to be able to discover the village below him. As a weapon, with a good sense of war, Abent would definitely check if there were any threats around him in an unfamiliar environment, especially below him. Abent was a complete fantasy breed, but fantasy breeds were also animals, and animals still valued their abdomens. However, it was also because of this that Abent discovered the village of the mountain people, which saved Wyrm the effort of finding them. In that case, Gopril, come down with me and take a look, Wyrm said as he stood up. Really, master? Instead, it was Giliel who became excited. After all, Wyrm had refused to bring Gopril out with various reasons, so Gopril had no choice but to stay. This time, she could finally go out to play, and help. How could Gopril not be excited? I feel bad about leaving you here all the time, but I'll say this in advance. Don't cause me trouble. Wyrm was giving her a sweet date, but the effect was quite obvious to Gopril. Yes, master. I know. Therefore, Wyrm brought Gopril, who was full of flattery and smiles, into the portal. Below Abent, in the village built on the mountain. The simple and unadorned villagers worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Even if there wasn't enough food and the water wasn't clean, they weren't dispirited because of this, and they didn't frown because of the war. Although the war did not affect them to a certain extent, it could be seen from this that the people of the mountains were optimistic. However, optimism did not mean that the mountain people were brave. At this moment, they were frightened by the sudden appearance of the black-purple ripples at the village entrance. Because the village wasn't very big and it was daytime, the villagers were all busy. Therefore, the abnormality at the entrance of the village instantly attracted everyone's attention. Quick! Quickly go and find Lord Hundred Faces. It was not known who shouted, but someone immediately reacted. A few thin and light youths who looked like they could run quickly volunteered themselves and ran towards the houses in the village behind them. However, they did not think that with so many villagers noticing the abnormality at the entrance of the village, how could Hassan, an inhuman existence, not notice it? Before those young people could run far, a black figure appeared in front of them. It was a petite and muscular figure. Her body was only wrapped in a few pieces of simple cloth. Although she was not big, the slightly bulging female sexual characteristics proved that she was a woman. The most special thing was that she wore a skull mask on her face. There was no doubt that she was one of Hassan, or rather, she was the Lord Hundred Faces, in the villagers' mouths. Lord Hundred Faces, you're here. As if they had found their pillar of support, the villagers gathered around Hassan, who was a man of many faces. Hurry up and get away from here. If there is a battle, then go to the underground caves in the surrounding mountain walls to take refuge first, Hassan said to the surrounding villagers with a solemn expression. Yes, Lord Hundred Faces. The villagers immediately responded. They all knew their limits. If they insisted on staying, there was no doubt that they would add a burden to Hassan. Moreover, if the enemy was weak and did not need their help, Hassan alone could handle it. If the enemy was strong, they would naturally be useless as a burden. Immediately afterward, the villagers began to retreat to the village behind them. If they took a few steps back in advance, they could quickly leave if something happened. At this moment, the black-purple ripples suddenly changed. Like a stone entering the water, the black-purple ripples were stirred. Then, a black-haired, red-eyed boy in local costume and a lovely girl with wings came out. It was naturally Wyrm and Gopril. The handsome man and the beautiful woman made the villagers a little overwhelmed for a while and relaxed their vigilance. Who are you? Hassan asked Wyrm vigilantly. She saw that the two people in front of her were servants. On Wyrm's side, because someone took the lead to ask him a question as soon as he came out, Wyrm was stunned. He was a little surprised by the scene in front of him, but he could accept it because it was reasonable. Because of the vision provided by Abanthi, Wyrm's portal could be opened in this village, but Wyrm did not expect that the portal he opened would directly open at the entrance of the village, and it was seen by a group of villagers. The strange black-purple ripples naturally brought panic to the villagers, and it also brought suspicion to Hassan. The solution to this situation was to express goodwill. The best way to clear up misunderstandings was to be honest, such as answering the other party's questions truthfully. I am a servant of the Saber rank, real name is Vilo Serenseed. This is the servant of the Berserker rank that I summoned, real name is Gopril. What? Hassan was stunned. For Hassan, who had hundreds of personalities and mastered hundreds of skills, it was easy to judge whether a person was lying through their expression and language. She could see that the other party was not lying, but this was also what shocked Hassan. It wasn't strange for the other party to mention their class. After all, servants always referred to each other by their class. But what was strange was that when the other party mentioned their class, he also mentioned their real name. And it seemed that he was not lying. How could this not shock Hassan? As a servant, Hassan naturally knew the importance of the real name. The real name represented a weakness. If there was no big weakness, it would be fine. If there was a servant like Achilles and Siegfried who had quite obvious weaknesses, it was likely that they would be trapped. However, the other party did not seem to be famous. Gopril had never heard of it at all. As for Vilo Serenseed. Hassan was shocked and entered the battle state. You are the Lion King's people. Chapter 738. The reason why Hassan thought that Wyrm was the Lion King was because of the name, Vilo Serenth. Because the enemy was the Lion King, and the name of the Lion King's knights was the same as the name of the Knights of the Round Table. As a Hassan who mastered hundreds of skills, the knowledge of historical stories also existed. As a result, Hassan naturally had information about various heroes. Coincidentally, the information about the Knights of the Round Table was also in her mind. After investigation, she naturally investigated the Lion King who occupied the Holy City and his knights. She found that the Lion King's knights might be the Knights of the Round Table. Why was she so sure? It was because they were servants. The Lion King and his knights who suddenly appeared defeated the Lionheart King after a fierce battle and occupied the Holy City. This was not the era of Hyuga Hassan. Hyuga Hassan also understood that she herself was a follower. Therefore, Hyuga Hassan guessed that the Lion King of the Holy City and his knights were also followers. After knowing that the Lion King's knights had the same name as the Knights of the Round Table, she doubted whether the Lion King was King Arthur. However, because the Lion King lived in seclusion, and the Holy City was extremely difficult to sneak in, Hassan had never seen the Lion King. However, Hassan had seen a few people like Gawain, Lancelot, Agull, Mordred, Tristan, and the like. Not only her, but her compatriots, Cursed Wrist Hassan and Drunk Smoke Hassan had also seen those people. According to the books, those people were most likely the Knights of the Round Table. Vilo Sarinth was also the name of the Knights of the Round Table. Together with the Knights of the Round Table in the Holy City, it was impossible for Hassan not to misunderstand. I'm Vilo Sarinth, a Knight of the Round Table, but I'm not from the Holy City, Wuming explained helplessly. Wuming changed into the clothes of the Eastern Wind because he was afraid that the mountain people would think that he was a Knight of the Round Table. This was realized. Wuming didn't have a problem with revealing his weakness if he revealed his name. The reason why Wuming told Wuming his real name was because he had no weaknesses, so he was not afraid of being targeted. Gopril was even more so because she was a guest from another world. In addition, Wuming didn't think that anyone would recognize him, so he reported his name without hesitation. But he didn't expect the servant in front of him to recognize the character that his name represented. I can only say that as expected of Hassan. Wuming sighed inwardly. As an assassin, her ability to gather information was naturally not weak. Wuming did not know much about the Middle East. In Wuming's opinion, there should not be any books about the Knights of the Round Table here, which was shrouded in war and apocalypse. However, Wuming did not think that Hassan might have known about the Knights of the Round Table for a long time. You want to lie to me? Don't even think about it. Hassan didn't listen to Wuming. If her analysis was correct, the Lion King was King Arthur, and she had never seen a Knight of the Round Table who was independent of the Holy City's forces. Damn Knight! Not only did you harm my compatriots, but you also want to kill all of us. I will never let you go. Hassan rushed to Wuming as if he was blinded by anger. In an instant, silhouettes of different sizes and genders appeared beside Hassan. Clones of the spiritual base? You are Hassan of the Round Table. Wuming saw the identity of Hassan of the Round Table at a glance. The Assassin class card made by Julian contained the power of almost all Hassans except the first Hassan. As someone who had studied the Assassin class card, Wuming naturally understood the ability of each Hassan. To be able to create a large number of clones that were not illusions, except for Hassan of the Round Table, who was now known as the existence of multiple personalities, there should be no Hassan who could do it. And you say you are not from the Holy City? Hassan of the Round Table responded angrily. Those who were familiar with her were either her friends or her enemies. She naturally couldn't be friends with any Knights of the Round Table, so there was only one answer. Enemy. Die. Countless figures surrounded Wuming and Gopril, and then swarmed up as if they were going to fight to the death. Wuming saw that the other party did not listen to his explanation and shook his head helplessly. Could it be that because the other party had multiple personalities, he had some mental problems? Wuming remembered that Gadotsi also said that they had met Hassan of the Round Table when they were in the desert. When the other party saw the pattern on Matthew's shield, he thought that Matthew was from the Holy City and directly abandoned the kidnapped Nidacolls and ran away. Wuming decided not to explain to the mental patient and beat him first. Gopril, Wuming said casually. Yes, Gopro responded with a smile, and then, the magic power in her body was released. The magic power that was comparable to a low-level noble relic was released and instantly broke the clones of the round table that surrounded Wuming and Gopro. Although Gopro's magic power release broke many of the clones, there were still many clones around the village entrance. Damn it! At least we have to buy time for the villagers. Hassan of the Round Table, as the main body, was hidden among the clones, looking at the villagers who had begun to retreat and gritted his teeth. Then, one of the clones left and ran toward the villagers. The clones would give the villagers the direction of escape. The enemy was a holy city knight, and it was no longer safe to hide in the underground shelter of the mountain. After she was defeated or killed, the other party would definitely be able to find that shelter. So, the Round Table let her clones guide the villagers to the cursed wrist in the east, while her main body stayed behind to resist the enemy. After Hassan of the Round Table guessed that the other party was a holy city knight, he was not prepared to leave alive. A clone was a clone after all. Disregarding everything else, the clone's strength was much weaker than the main body. Otherwise, the clones that besieged Wuming and Gopro in the beginning would not have been directly destroyed by Gopro's magic power release. In short, the main body could not leave. This was indeed strange for her as an assassin. After all, an assassin was not suitable for direct combat. If she could run, the Round Table would not hesitate. Just like when she met the Holy City Knight when she kidnapped the Sun King in the desert, she would have chosen to run because she had no compatriots to protect behind her. But she could not do that now. The village was behind her, and the villagers were ordinary people. If she did not hold back the enemy, the villagers would not be able to escape. I hope they can escape to the cursed wrist in the east. Bai Qian prayed in her heart. The village she was in was located in the west of the mountains, and the cursed wrist was located in the east of the mountains. Although the villages on both sides were not far away, they were not close either. Everything would be fine if they escaped because she had seen the cursed wrist Hassan before. The other party was the current generation's Hassan, a qualified Hassan, and would not leave the villagers in the west village alone. But all this depended on the Round Table Hassan being able to hold back Wuming and Gopro. Chapter 739. Giliel, 7 o'clock. Wuming did not even look at the 7 o'clock direction and said casually to Giliel. Understood. Giliel smiled cruelly, grabbed the energy side that appeared out of thin air, and rushed toward Wuming's 7 o'clock direction. How is this possible? Hassan's heart skipped a beat. She was at Wuming's 7 o'clock direction. But how did the opponent know? This was the first thought that popped up in Hassan's mind. However, this was a normal thing in Wuming's view. As early as when Hassan appeared in front of Wuming with his true body, she had nowhere to hide in Wuming's eyes. If Hassan did not appear in his true body at the beginning, Wuming would have to put in a lot of effort to find his true body. But now, it was easy. The reason why Assassin was called Assassin was because Assassin had excellent concealment ability. However, Hassan, who had appeared in front of Wuming, had undoubtedly lost the advantage of excellent concealment. Wuming could easily find Hassan's true body. Finding 100 Faces Hassan's true body meant that 100 Faces Hassan was defeated. Because he could not resist Giliel's assault at all. Damn it! Hassan secretly cursed and commanded his doppelgangers to cover him. However, this was of no use. A berserker who did not lack magic power was not something an assassin who had lost the advantage of concealment could stop. Numbers might have a little effect in front of Giliel, but because Giliel had overused his clones, each clone had become quite weak. As mentioned earlier, Hassan's clones were weaker than his true body because the power of the clones came from his true body. When the true body split into clones, it meant that the true body was weakened. And the power that was weakened from the true body was divided into many parts, so naturally, it was not that strong. Therefore, in just an instant, the human wall, formed by Hassan was violently broken through by Giliel. Wielding her magic scythe, Jillian slashed at her path in a disorderly manner. Due to Wuming's embodiment of authority, Gopro could use her mana without restraint. Every slash and slash contained a large amount of mana. Because Hassan's essence was multiple personalities, her clones were equivalent to people with different consciousnesses. Ah! Damn it! Die! Stop! Don't come any closer. Don't come over. The mana release transformed into a shockwave that the 100 Faces doppelgangers couldn't resist at all. There were too many of them, and their power wasn't weak at all. Like different people, they all made noises. Among them, there were definitely those who were timid and scared out of their wits. There were also those who weren't afraid of death and wanted to risk their lives to attack Jillian. There were all kinds of personalities. After all, wasn't there multiple personalities? But that was not important. What was important was that Hassan was about to be captured alive. Under such circumstances, there was only one way for Baijiu Hassan to win, and that was to capture the leader first. Die! Hassan's voice came from behind Wuming, and Wuming could even feel a cold wind slashing at his neck. Baijiu Hassan was indeed an assassin. Relying on the cover of his clones, Baijiu Hassan successfully sneaked to Wuming's side and carried out the assassination. Gilliel turned her head and looked at Baijiu Hassan, who appeared from the shadow behind Wuming, and exclaimed, "Master." After all, Gilliel was not a heroic spirit. Gilliel's current servant body was just a clone in Gilliel's eyes. Gilliel did not discover in time that Baijiu Hassan had slipped away and sneaked to Wuming's side. However, this did not mean that Wuming did not discover it. Wuming had been a servant many times, and he had also been an assassin because Wuming knew about the assassin class. With Wuming's understanding of the assassin class, although Baijiu Hassan's behavior was not showing off his slight skill in front of an expert, it was ineffective against Wuming. Clatter, the sound of chains rang behind Wuming, and Baijiu Hassan groaned. Ugh! Wuming unhurriedly turned his head and looked behind him. The purple-haired woman with the skull mask was pouncing forward, and there was a dagger in her forearm. The dagger was only a few centimeters away from Wuming's neck. However, Wuming did not panic at all, because at this moment, Baijiu Hassan's body was wrapped in silver-white chains that exuded a purple aura. That was the annihilation lock that merged with Wuming's authority incarnation. Baijiu Hassan's limbs and body were tightly entangled by the annihilation lock that appeared from the void. Because Wuming was wary of Assassin's body, Baijiu Hassan's palms and fingers were entangled. Otherwise, with Baijiu Hassan's skills, he could send the dagger into Wuming's throat at such a distance by moving his fingers. Wuming looked at Baijiu Hassan's skull mask and fell into silence. Not to mention, it was quite scary to look at such a close distance. However, it was also because of such a close distance that Wuming also discovered that Baijiu Hassan's mask seemed to be able to be taken off. Although he knew that Hassan's mask was inlaid on his face after shaving off his face, he always had to look at the real thing, right? King Arthur was a woman, so maybe Hassan did not have to dig out his face and then inlay a skull mask on it like in the records. You're a girl, so why are you wearing a skull mask? Wuming said as he put his hand on Baijiu Hassan's face. You. He easily took off Baijiu Hassan's mask, revealing Baijiu Hassan's indignant face. It was not a delicate face. Although it was a little tanned, she was still a girl. However, looking at Baijiu Hassan's limbs and the slightly bulging muscles on his body, Wuming chose to remain silent. You bastard! Baijiu Hassan naturally saw the meaning in Wuming's eyes and roared angrily. She was a woman, after all. Her skin was just a little tanned and a little more muscular. Did she have to look at people differently? Master, are you okay? At this moment, Gopro suddenly came to Wuming's side. Because Baijiu Hassan was captured, Annihilation Lock took effect, and all of Baijiu Hassan's clones had disappeared. The person who can kill your master hasn't been born yet. Wuming smiled and answered Gopro jokingly. However, Wuming was right. Even Wuming's biggest enemy now, Gidia, who had fused with part of the black mud, could not kill Wuming, at least for now. Wuming turned to look at Baijiu Hassan, ignoring Baijiu Hassan's angry expression and words. Wuming looked like he was going to negotiate. So, can we have a good talk, Baijiu Hassan? However, no negotiation would tie the other party up. Chapter 740. Negotiate? Humph. There is nothing to talk about between us. If I lose to you, I can only blame myself for not being as good as you. Just kill me. 100 Faces Hassan turned his head away, looking like he was ready to die heroically. According to 100 Faces Hassan's understanding, after the people of the holy city caught the enemy, if there was no torture value, then they would definitely kill them directly. Simply put, no captives were left. However, there were exceptions. The sentence, if there was no torture value, just now was the best explanation. If there was torture value, the knights of the holy city would capture the captured person. His current state reminded 100 Faces of one of Hassan's compatriots. The people of the holy city needed Hassan's information, so they took him away after they caught him. The purpose was to torture him for information. How similar 100 Faces Hassan was to her compatriot now. 100 Faces Hassan looked at the chain that wrapped around him. This strange chain constantly nibbled away at the magic power on the surface of his body. Only by keeping the magic power in the body and not using it could he slow down the chains nibbling away at the magic power. However, this only slowed down the speed. What should be nibbled away was still being nibbled away. Although 100 Faces Hassan could commit suicide without using magic power, this chain seemed to be able to nibble away at 100 Faces Hassan's strength. What he said to Wyrm just now had exhausted 100 Faces Hassan's strength. This made 100 Faces Hassan not even have the strength to commit suicide. Damn it, am I going to leave here? 100 Faces Hassan shouted in his heart, but his eyelids gradually closed. The power of the Annihilation Lock was not something that 100 Faces Hassan could resist. The Annihilation Lock controlled by Wyrm was gradually nibbling away at all his power, causing 100 Faces Hassan to enter a coma. Generally speaking, entering a coma when extremely weak meant that one was half a step into death. Walala, suddenly, 100 Faces Hassan felt the chain that tightly bound him leave him. And 100 Faces, who had lost most of his power, also collapsed to the ground because of the lack of the support of the chain. What do you mean? 100 Faces Hassan struggled to support himself and frowned at Wyrm. Due to the removal of the Annihilation Lock, 100 Faces Hassan's power was no longer being devoured. Although he could not recover quickly, at least he would not fall into a coma. This is my sincerity, Wyrm said in a seemingly sincere and serious manner. Actually, the reason why Wyrm had released the 100 Faces Hassan was because he was not familiar with the Annihilation Lock. Wyrm underestimated the power of the Annihilation Lock. He did not expect that the Annihilation Lock could almost annihilate a servant's power. Therefore, Wyrm quickly let go of 100 Faces Hassan. This practice proved Wyrm's sincerity. Releasing 100 Face Hassan was to prevent her from dying. It also showed that Wyrm was not afraid that 100 Face Hassan would run away. Because he was very sincere. However, in Hassan's eyes, this was a naked insult. Firstly, he had released him when he was about to lose consciousness. It was obvious that he didn't want the interrogator to fall unconscious and continue the interrogation. Secondly, the other party was saying that it didn't matter if he let her go, and even if she ran away, he would catch her again. These two were 100 Face Hassan's inner understanding, so she was even angrier. Don't you think you can get any information from me? Give up. At that moment, 100 Face Hassan was ready to commit suicide. But Wyrm did not make a move, because Giliel, who was next to Wyrm, made a move. Swish, a girl's white arm flashed quickly, and her arm cut through the atmosphere with a loud sound. Boom, only a boom sound was heard. 100 Face Hassan's head was pressed to the ground by the soft arm, and smoke and dust were everywhere. The arm that attacked 100 Face Hassan was Giliel's. Don't be too greedy, you monkey. Giliel's eyes were red, and her pupils turned into a big sword symbol. Giliel's wings spread out, and the magic that had been transformed was emitted from Giliel's wings, floating into the sky like smoke. Feathers fell from the sky slightly. They were the feathers that were blown into the sky because Giliel attacked 100 Face Hassan too quickly. Giliel's left hand grabbed Hundred-Face Hassan's face and pressed it deeply into the ground, and traces of blood flowed into the ground. Giliel's other hand was holding a pinkish-purple magic scythe, eager to try. This gave people the feeling that she would cut off Hundred-Face Hassan's head in the next moment. That was how Hundred-Face Hassan felt at that moment anyway. Not only that, Hundred-Face Hassan could see through the gaps between Giliel's fingers that Giliel's hand holding the scythe was trembling slightly. She's suppressing the urge to kill me. Hassan was shocked. He, who had hundreds of memories, could naturally see Jillian's current state. But she was not afraid of death, she was just afraid of Giliel's current state. She felt that the angel in front of her was a beast, and it was the kind that was angered. Death was not scary. What was scary was living a life worse than death. Although the other party did not do anything to him, the current Giliel gave Hundred-Face Hassan such a feeling. Calm down, Giliel. Wuming came behind Giliel and stroked Giliel's head. After all, Wuming was not a good person. Although he had a servant form and his faction was order, Wuming himself was not completely order. Compared to order, neutrality was more suitable for Wuming. Doing good deeds to good people and evil deeds to evil people, having compassion but not excessive compassion for others, having evil deeds but not indulging in evil deeds. Wuming was already very polite to Hundred-Face Hassan. He tried not to provoke a fight and defended himself. After the battle, he only wanted to capture Hundred-Face alive. He did not attack the villagers and showed mercy everywhere. However, Hundred-Face still did not appreciate it. Although Giliel followed Wuming for a short time, she was a person with a high EQ. She figured out Wuming's character through details in a short time, so she was angry with Hundred-Face Hassan. Hundred-Face Hassan was too hostile to Wuming, or too hostile to the Knights of the Holy City, although the Knights of the Holy City had done a lot of evil things. To put it nicely, it was abhorrence of evil. To put it bluntly, it was self-righteous. Giliel believed that Hundred-Face Hassan was no longer worthy of Wuming's kindness. Hundred-Face Hassan was already an insult to Wuming. As Wuming's loyal subordinate, Giliel could not stand it, so she made a move. After being touched by Wuming for a while, Giliel, who calmed down a little, let go of Hundred-Face Hassan, and blood fell from Giliel's fingers. It was Hundred-Face Hassan's blood, not Giliel's. You're just a strand of magic power. At most, you're just the soul of a special monkey. Monkeys can't see the kindness of my master. Although Giliel had calmed down a little, her eyes were still red. It could be said that if Giliel didn't see that Wuming didn't want to cause trouble, she would have used Sky Strike to blast Hundred-Face Hassan to pieces. Hundred-Face Hassan fell into silence. By now, she also saw that there was something else going on. Chapter 741. Hundred-Face Hassan was lying in the ground groove that matched his body size. This was caused by Gopril's huge force. On the surface, Hundred-Face Hassan was a little stunned at the moment, as if he was beaten silly by Gopril. Blood flowed out from the back of Hundred-Face Hassan's head, soaking the soil and making it bright red. When Gopril attacked Hundred-Face Hassan was in a weak state, and Gopril's attack caused serious injuries to Hundred-Face Hassan, but it was not fatal. Hundred-Face Hassan was also a servant. As long as the brain in charge of thinking and the core located in the heart were not destroyed, Hundred-Face Hassan would not die, or he could still be saved, so, Hundred-Face Hassan struggled and sat up slowly. Although the injury she suffered was not fatal, it was still quite uncomfortable. At the beginning, Hundred-Face Hassan felt that her ribs were basically all broken. Are you really not from the Holy City? Hundred-Face Hassan said in a weak voice. After experiencing the intimidation of the beast Gopril, Hundred-Face Hassan, who was blinded by anger because of hatred for the Holy City Knight, also calmed down, or she got rid of the anger she deliberately fell into before. In fact, when Wuming defended himself, Hundred-Face Hassan also had a trace of doubt before, but compared to believing that Wuming, who was wearing the skin of the Holy City Knight, was a good person, Hundred-Face Hassan was more inclined to believe that Wuming was a bad person. The reason was simple, that was, 100 Faces Hassan's responsibility to the villagers. If what Wu Ming said was true, then nothing would happen to the villagers, but if Wu Ming lied to her, then the villagers were likely to be wiped out. 100 Faces Hassan had the ability to detect micro-expressions, so he also had the ability to see if a person was lying, but was there such a possibility? Assuming that Wu Ming was not hostile, but the people behind him, or the higher-ups of the holy city, Lion King, were hostile to the villagers, exposing the village to Wu Ming would result in the villagers being wiped out. And who knew if Wu Ming had the means to deceive her skills? If Wu Ming said that he was good at micro-expressions, he could also deceive her. If the villagers' lives were lost because of 100 Faces Hassan's carelessness, 100 Faces Hassan would not forgive herself. And if Wu Ming was not a bad person, then at least the other party would not kill him. Therefore, with a similar principle of, better to kill the wrong than to let the wrong person go, 100 Faces Hassan chose to enter a state of anger to test Wu Ming's authenticity. Because putting Wu Ming on the enemy's side was the safest thing to do at present. He could only say that she was indeed a mental patient with multiple personality disorder. Not only did she think too much, but she also thought too much. If Wu Ming knew 100 Looks Hassan's inner thoughts, he would definitely ridicule him. Why did she say that all-faced Hassan was outrageous? It was because she had made a wrong bet, and a very wrong one at that. Wu Ming had the ability to capture her alive in an instant. As a result, 100 Faces Hassan could not complete the judgment of whether Wu Ming was good or evil. Judging whether a person was good or evil could only be done in an extreme state. As for Wu Ming who captured her alive, 100 Faces Hassan could not judge at all. However, these were not in the way. The most important thing was still Gopril. Gopril was quite angry at 100 Faces Hassan's rudeness. Gopril's sudden attack not only shocked 100 Faces Hassan but also almost made her leave the stage. As mentioned before, if it were not for Gopril holding back because of Wu Ming, 100 Faces Hassan would have been killed by Gopril, sent back to the martyr's palace, and left the stage. Of course it's true. Gawain and the others chose to be loyal to our king who has embarked on the wrong path, but I didn't. I maintained the virtues of a knight. In short, I'm a genuinely good person, Wu Ming answered 100 Faces Hassan with a righteous face. Gopril looked at Wu Ming with a dumbfounded expression. Wu Ming's words made Gopril, who had calmed down a little after Wu Ming touched her heart, feel her heartbeat accelerate again. To put it simply, she was shocked. It was still the same sentence. Although it had only been a short time, Gopril thought she was quite familiar with her current master. Although her master was not considered a bad person, he could not be classified as a genuinely good person. However, as Wu Ming's subordinate, Gopril naturally would not tear down her master's stage in front of outsiders, so Gopril honestly chose to shut up and averted her gaze from Wu Ming. When Gopril shifted her gaze, Wu Ming looked at Gopril vaguely, his eyes full of satisfaction. Although Wu Ming did not guess 100 Faces Hassan's thoughts, as Gopril said, Wu Ming was not a good person, nor was he a kind man. Wu Ming treated people with sincerity, but 100 Faces Hassan treated Wu Ming like this. How could Wu Ming not teach 100 Faces Hassan a lesson? It could be said that Gopril's sudden attack on 100 Faces Hassan was the result of Wu Ming's indulgence. After all, how could Wu Ming, who had the willpower, not detect Gopril's location? Wu Ming had been using the willpower since he came to this village, and it was also because of the willpower that he locked onto 100 Faces Hassan's body. I'm here to find Chaldea's master and prepare to give her the Holy Grail. I need Chaldea's help to repair this singularity, Wu Ming said, taking out a large golden cup from the golden ripples that suddenly appeared beside him. There was no doubt that it was the Holy Grail. Sure enough, the moment the Holy Grail was taken out, 100 Faces Hassan was shocked. As a servant, 100 Faces Hassan naturally knew about the existence of the Holy Grail. This made the doubts in 100 Faces Hassan, who was still doubting Wu Ming, dissipate a lot. And I once saved Hassan and a lot of refugees from Drizzt. They can prove it for me, but it shouldn't be easy. Wu Ming really didn't expect to find Hassan and the refugees. After all, they must be in this mountain. Even if Hassan has a means of communication, it can't be contacted in a short time. Do you know the name of that Hassan? 100 Faces Hassan suddenly asked. I remember, listening to the refugee's name for that Hassan, it should be Smoke-Drunk Hassan, Wuming said thoughtfully. Hearing Wuming's words, 100 Faces Hassan's eyes lit up. Wuming naturally caught on to this point and thought to himself, could it be that there's a chance? I know where the refugees saved by Smoke-Drunk Hassan are. It can't be the refugees who just escaped, right? Wuming said jokingly. However, 100 Faces Hassan nodded. Wuming smiled helplessly. He was right. Chapter 742. You're quite assured. Wuming said to 100 Faces Hassan in a puzzled tone. Don't look at Wuming's unintelligent appearance. Wuming knew that he was not completely classified as a good person in 100 Faces Hassan's heart. Why was Wuming so sure? It was because Wuming had information about 100 Faces Hassan. 100 Faces Hassan was a multiple personality disorder patient with at least dozens of personalities. Now, if you want to do something to them, I can't stop you. 100 Faces Hassan responded to Wuming weakly. He also looked at the villagers who had just left the village and had not gone far. Similarly, Wuming also looked at the villagers. These villagers left from another entrance of the village. They did not go far at all. There were even a small number of villagers who had just left the village on the other side. After all, the battle between 100 Faces Hassan, Wuming, and Gopril ended too quickly. Those villagers were not servants. Such a short time was not enough for them. My compatriots' lives are over there. Anyway, I can't stop you. If what you said is true, then prove it to me. 100 Faces Hassan stared at Wuming's eyes and said in a serious tone. However, 100 Faces Hassan's tone made Gopril angry again. You bastard! Gopril let out a murderous aura. All Faces Hassan's fearless attitude, or rather, the attitude of throwing caution to the wind, made Gopril quite unhappy. Humph. As expected of Berserker. You're really easy to get angry. Your master hasn't gotten angry yet. 100 Faces Hassan looked at Gopril, unwilling to admit defeat. Anyway, the worst result was to be killed and return to the martyr's palace. If Wuming is really a good person, a few words of ridicule will definitely not let him kill me. This was 100 Faces Hassan's current thought. Alright, Jillian. Don't be angry. Maybe we'll be friends in a while, Wuming said as he pressed down on Jillian's shoulder. As soon as these words came out, Jillian's anger was instantly extinguished as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. According to his master's personality, if he were to prove his identity to the villagers, there was a possibility that he would become one of them. And if they became allies, then they couldn't casually attack their own people. Wouldn't he have to teach this guy a lesson? The way Gilio looked at Bai Yen Hassan became unfriendly once again. This sent a chill down Hassan's spine, and he swallowed his saliva. Then, Gopril turned to look at Wuming with a smile. Yes, master, you go ahead first, I'll take care of this monkey here, no. Just as 100 Faces Hassan was about to retort, Gilio suddenly pressed her hand on 100 Faces Hassan's mouth. Because 100 Faces Hassan was injured and weak, even if he used both hands, he couldn't pry Gilio's hand away from his mouth. He could only whimper there. Are you sure you can take care of her? Looking at Gilio, who was still smiling at him with one hand covering 100 Faces Hassan's mouth, Wuming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, after all, this monkey became like this mainly because of me. If there were people who were not familiar with Gilio, they might think that Gilio was a good person. However, Wuming was familiar with Gilio. He naturally knew that with Gilio's personality, she would never be so gentle to ask to take care of someone. Immediately afterward, Gilio continued. Master, don't forget that I have the authority you gave me. Although that is your authority, I seem to be able to use it too. Gilio was right. Vitality incarnation was stored in Gilio's body. It could not only be used as a passive ability, but it could also be used as an active skill. However, its power was not that sufficient. However, for the current injuries suffered by 100 Faces Hassan, Gilio's current ability was enough. Well, okay, then I'll leave it to you. Immediately, Wyrm nodded. Yes, please rest assured, I will definitely heal this monkey. Gilio tilted her head and replied with a smile. However, Hundred Faces Hassan's expression became even more desperate. At that moment, Wyrm just smiled helplessly. Remember to be moderate. Then, Wyrm left. Woo! Hundred Faces Hassan whimpered in despair and watched Wyrm, who ignored her, leave. Then, she saw Gypsy's beautiful smile that made her heart beat faster. She saw the angel, demon, smiling at her. Almost a few minutes later, Wyrm returned to the village with a group of villagers. When he came back, Wyrm had changed into the silver armor, but he was not wearing a helmet. After Wyrm caught up with the villagers, under the panicked and fearful eyes of the villagers, he directly used magic power to materialize his full armor without saying a word. Then, without needing Wyrm to speak, people who knew Wyrm naturally appeared among the villagers. And these people who knew Wyrm were naturally the refugees that Wyrm saved. In this way, after Wyrm explained the problem quite simply, the villagers were relieved. Simply put, it was actually a big misunderstanding, which made the villagers feel awkward. After that, the villagers who were saved warmly thanked them one by one. This caught Wyrm a little off guard. After a very short exchange of greetings, the villagers followed Wyrm back to the village. After being appeased, the villagers returned to their houses. After that, Wyrm came to the place where Hundred Faces Hassan and Gilio were. Hugo Hassan had a look of being played to death as he slumped on the ground, while Gapril had a look of joy. But looking at Hundred Faces Hassan, it seemed that the injuries he suffered before had basically healed. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you, Master. Gilio walked to Wyrm's side. Looking at Hassan, who was slumped on the ground with an expression of being toyed with, and then looking at Gapril, who was smiling more and more happily, even if Wyrm did not see what happened between the two, he could more or less guess it. Anyway, it's not a good thing. However, after all, Hundred Faces Hassan had been cured, so Wyrm was not going to get to the bottom of what happened in the few minutes he was not here. Wyrm looked at Hundred Faces Hassan. You saw it too. I didn't do anything to the villagers. Some of them do know me. Hundred Faces Hassan did not speak as if he was still immersed in the broken state. But at least he was one of Hassan, the avatar of a heroic spirit in human history. Hundred Faces Hassan quickly adjusted his state of mind. But his eyes were filled with shame and humiliation when he looked at Gilio. I know, it's my mistake this time. I apologize to you here. In the end, Hundred Faces Hassan apologized honestly. So, can you answer us if we have any information about Master Chaldea? Chapter 743. Can you tell us, Master Chaldea, where is Tachika Fujimaru? Wyrm asked directly. Unfortunately, I don't know. Hassan shook his head. This answer made Wyrm frown involuntarily. It was not that Wyrm was dissatisfied with Hassan, but he was a little irritated because he didn't get the information he needed for a long time. However, this was another matter in the eyes of Hassan. I didn't lie. I really don't know the information you said about the Master of Chaldea. There are only villagers in this village, and I don't know the Master of Chaldea. Hassan tried his best to explain. After Hassan's explanation, Wyrm also understood what was going on. There were indeed multiple Hassans in this endless mountain range, and there were even a lot of them. But that was before Wyrm came to this singularity. After the confrontation with Lionheart King Charlie, Western Desert Sun King, and Sacred City Lion King, the Hassans died one by one. After all, Hassan's class was Assassin, the weakest of the 7 classes. In terms of servant attributes, the other classes could be said to be able to defeat the Assassin class. Only Caster could be compared to the Assassin class. Of course, this was the ranking among ordinary servants. If it was a crown servant, then the definition of the weakest class of the Assassin class did not count. Wyrm still remembered the first Hassan who attacked him. That guy looked like Saber wearing the skin of the Assassin class. However, other Hassans were not so powerful except for the first Hassan. All in all, according to Hassan, many Hassans died in the hands of the enemy, and there were only 4 Hassans left. Cursed Hand Hassan, who was located in the eastern village, Quiet Hand Hassan, who was previously captured by the enemy, Smoky Drunk Hassan, who was rescued by Wyrm, and her, Hassan. However, Quiet Hand Hassan was captured, Smoky Drunk Hassan was nowhere to be found, so the only one who still kept in touch with Hassan was Cursed Hand Hassan in the eastern village. Regarding the whereabouts of Drunk Smoke Hassan, Wyrm felt that he might know where the other party went. Later, Wyrm spoke to Hassan. After being rescued by me, is Smoky Drunk Hassan going to sneak into the sacred city? Hassan froze for a moment, then nodded. She does have such an idea, and she has already acted on it. For the problem of not being able to contact Smoky Drunk Hassan, in Hassan's view, it might be that Smoky Drunk Hassan had sneaked into the sacred city. However, Wyrm's words made Hassan's zzz. Smoky Drunk Hassan didn't sneak into the sacred city, she should have left. Left the arena. 100 Faces Hassan did not react in time. Then, Wyrm told Hassan what he heard from the refugees waiting at the sacred city gate for Saint Uplift. What those people said about killing a leader of the mountain people, I think this leader should be referring to Smoky Drunk Hassan. After all, other than Hassan, there was no one else who could be the leader of the mountain people. Is that so? Smoky Drunk has left. Hassan looked a little disappointed. After all, she was still a compatriot, and she was also a member of Hassan's family. She was closer to him than the other mountain people. But this is just my guess. After we find Chaldea's master, we will naturally know if it was Smoky Drunk Hassan who was killed at the sacred city gate. Wyrm's words gave Hassan hope. That's true. Hassan nodded. Hassan had something to look forward to and a goal in his heart. In this way, it was beneficial to both Wyrm and Hassan himself. This was conducive to finding Gadotsi as soon as possible. Villo. Sir, I can almost guess where the master of Chaldea you mentioned is. After all, it was the person who defeated him easily, so Hassan awkwardly added the honorific, Sir. Just call me Villo. Wyrm was uncomfortable with Hassan's awkward way of addressing him. Then, Wyrm probed into Hassan's question of almost guessing where the master of Chaldea is. In fact, Wyrm had guessed it too. The place you're talking about should be Cursed Wrist's village in the east. Gadotsi and the others must be with a certain Hassan in this mountain. However, Hassan said that there were only 4 Hassans left, and Quiet Hassan was captured and his fate was unknown. Smoky Drunk Hassan was also suspected to have left, and his fate was also unknown. Hassan did not know Gadotsi's whereabouts, so there was only Cursed Wrist Hassan left. I don't know if my luck is good or bad. Wyrm smiled helplessly. He was lucky to find Hassan's village in a random search. However, Gadotsi seemed to be in another village, and this village was the final answer found by elimination. This could be called bad luck. However, I finally have a goal. This was considered a blessing in disguise. Then, Wyrm looked at Hassan. You should know where Cursed Wrist Hassan's village is. Wyrm's meaning was clear. He wanted Hassan to take him to Cursed Wrist Hassan's village in the east. Yes, Mr. Villo. I know the location of Cursed Wrist's village in the east. Hassan did not take Wyrm's suggestion. He still called him, Sir, Sir. In fact, he had gotten used to it. Although Hassan nodded, he looked a little reserved, as if there was something hidden. You're worried about these villagers, aren't you? Wyrm saw through Hassan's thoughts. Yes, Mr. Villo. The Knights of the Holy City have not given up on us. If I leave, I'm afraid that the Knights will attack while I'm away. When it came to the lives of her compatriots, Hassan would not be careless. Regarding this matter, I have a good idea, Wyrm said as he looked at Gopril who was behind him. Being stared at by Wyrm like this, Gopril, who was humming a song, suddenly trembled. She stopped humming and froze on the spot. Wyrm and Gopril stared at each other, and no one spoke first. When Hassan was about to lose his patience, Gopril spoke first. That. Master, you don't want me to stay here to protect these monkeys, do you? However, Wyrm acted as if he had heard wrongly. He put his hand on Gopril's shoulder and patted her twice. As expected of Gopril. I'm glad that you're willing to stay. Hassan looked as if he had seen a ghost. Gopril did not refute because she knew that it was useless to refute. Immediately afterward, Wyrm looked at Baijiu Hassan. In that case, Hassan, go communicate with the villagers. We'll depart immediately. Okay. Okay. Chapter 744. In the end, Gopril, who looked reluctant but could not say anything, stayed in the village where Hassan was, which was referred to as the West Village. To be safe, Wyrm also left a bounty thousands of meters above the West Village. At such a height, Wyrm believed that no one would discover a bounty. With a bounty protecting the West Village from above, Wyrm believed that even if the Knights of the Round Table came, there would be no casualties. After that, Wyrm and Hassan left the West Village and set foot on the road to the village where Cursed Wrist Hassan was, which was referred to as the East Village. Starting from the West Village, almost an hour later, in the mountains near the East Village, a black assassin and a white knight leaped here. These two were Hassan and Wyrm, who set foot on the road to the East Village. Because Hassan and Silent Wonder's agility was not low, the two of them were traveling at a very fast speed. On a slightly flat ground, Hassan, who was leading the way, stopped there. Like a chain reaction, Wyrm naturally stopped as well. Mr. Villo, after crossing this mountain, we will reach the East Village. Hassan pointed to a small hill in front and explained to Wyrm. Wyrm nodded. In fact, 100 Faces Hassan's guidance was quite useful. The distance between the West Village and the East Village was not far, but the road between them was not so easy to walk. The mountains were steep, and the cliffs were steep. It was not easy to walk, or it was impossible to walk. Although Hassan led the way, this road was not impossible to walk, and reached a point where it was quite difficult to walk. It could be seen that Hassan played a considerable role. Of course, this so-called, quite difficult to walk, was only for Gadotsi. For Wyrm, there was no place that was difficult to walk. Because Wyrm did not rely on his legs to walk, but he used telekinesis to fly. However, Hassan was still a great help. So, Wyrm thanked Hassan. Thank you for your hard work, Baijiu. However, Hassan shook his head as if he didn't care about Wyrm's condolences. Immediately afterward, Hassan pleaded to Wyrm. I have a request. I hope Mr. Villo can agree to it, please. It turned out that it was not that he did not care about Wyrm's condolences, but he used this as a bargaining chip to ask for a favor from Wyrm. For such a negotiation, Wyrm did not mind, but Wyrm would not simply agree to something unknown. First, tell me what you're here for. If it's part of my job, I definitely won't shirk from it. Hassan made his plea, in a respectful tone. I hope you can rescue Tranquil Hassan. Tranquil Hassan, one of the 4 existing Hassans, was captured by the Knights of the Holy City, and his fate was unknown. This is not a problem, but do you know where Tranquil Hassan is now? Also, can you be sure that Tranquil Hassan is still alive? Saving people was naturally not a problem, but Wyrm did not know Tranquil Hassan's current location. More importantly, whether Tranquil Hassan had already left. If the safety of Tranquil Hassan could not be guaranteed, then all this plan would become a dream. It's good that you can agree. Naturally, there is no problem with your 2 requests. There was a hint of joy on Hassan's face. Hassan did not care about Wyrm's 2 questions. He only cared about whether Wyrm would agree. I know Tranquil Hassan's location. It is a fortress used by the Knights of the Holy City to suppress mortals, and I can guarantee Tranquil Hassan's safety 100%. She has never left. Wyrm was naturally puzzled by Hugo Hassan's confident tone. Without needing Wyrm to ask, Hassan gave an explanation himself. In fact, the reason why the other Hassans left was not because they were killed, but because they chose to commit suicide. Then, these Hassans did not take away the Knights of the Round Table, and Tranquil Hassan was in a powerless state when she was captured, so she could not die with the enemy and could only be captured by the enemy. So that's how it is, Wu Ming immediately understood. It was not easy to catch a follower. It would be unwise not to capture her and torture her for information. That was why Hassan said that Tranquil Hassan's safety was guaranteed. So, will Tranquil Hassan try to commit suicide? Wu Ming asked again. After all, the previous Hassans were trying to perish together with the enemy in the end. It seemed that they were not willing to fall into the hands of the enemy. So, will Tranquil Hassan commit suicide in prison? Wu Ming would not doubt that Hassan did not have the means to commit suicide. The reason why the assassin was called an assassin was that he could kill others and himself. An assassin who couldn't even, "I'll kill myself," was a little unqualified. So, in order to prevent the enemy from extracting information and not to let himself suffer, Tranquil Hassan should take advantage of the gap to commit suicide in prison. However, Hassan shook his head and slapped Wu Ming's face. Unfortunately, because of Tranquil Hassan's physique, she can't commit suicide. Wu Ming didn't want to talk. Since it's a physique problem, there is no way, Wu Ming said. Let's go. After finding Tachika, I will rescue Tranquil Hassan as soon as possible. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Villo. Then, the two went over the mountain and came to the back of the mountain. A village that was the same as West Village appeared in front of Wu Ming. It was also a small village built by the mountain and located on a small flat land. People in Middle Eastern costumes were busy. Although they were poor, everyone's face was full of smiles. Like the villagers of West Village, the villagers of East Village did not give up because of the war, but worked hard to live for tomorrow. This unique spirit that belonged to humans was what Wu Ming liked the most. Are you Lord Hundred Faces? Suddenly, a voice came into Wu Ming's ears and pulled Wu Ming back to reality. A woman at the entrance of the village was standing there, looking at Wu Ming and Hassan who were standing not far away from the village entrance. Yes, is Cursed Wrist in the village? Hassan asked gently. It seemed that when facing her compatriots, Hassan would become extraordinarily gentle. Yes, Lord Hundred Faces, Lord Cursed Wrist is in the village at the moment. Also, welcome, Lord Hundred Faces, the woman greeted respectfully. Wu Ming could see that this was not respect between superiors and subordinates, but respect for the person who worshipped. This is. At this time, the woman also noticed Wu Ming and asked in a panic. My name is Villo Saransword. I am a knight, but I am not your enemy, so please don't panic, madam. Wu Ming elegantly performed a knight's salute to the woman and eased the atmosphere. A knight belonging to our people. What a coincidence, there are also two in our village. Hearing Wu Ming's words, the woman's face regained a smile. Then, Wu Ming frowned because she said that there were two knights. Chapter 745. According to the words of the woman in front of him, Wu Ming could judge that there was a knight-type servant in this village. If there was no accident, it should be Matthew. In this way, he could also confirm that Gadazzi and Da Vinci were here. However, the two knights part did not make sense in any case. Among Chaldea's group, only Matthew was a knight-type servant. Whether it was Da Vinci who came this time or Pamilia who did not come this time, they were not knight-type servants. One of the knights was Matthew, so who was the other knight? Was it a mole from the enemy? Or was it a new servant summoned by Gadazzi? Or was it a lone servant? Wait a minute, there are knights in your village. Compared to Wu Ming's silent frown, Hassan was much more direct and directly expressed his doubts. Because of the continuous deaths of his compatriots, Hassan was full of malice toward the knights. Previously, when Hugo Hassan faced Wu Ming, he was filled with disgust. If it weren't for the fact that he spent a little physical effort, Hugo Hassan wouldn't talk to Wu Ming so amiably and walk together. Wu Ming proved that he was a good knight, but this was only for Wu Ming alone. For other knights, Hassan still maintained his previous attitude, extreme disgust. Yes, The two knights and Lady Cursed Wrist escorted the compatriots who fled from the holy city to the village, so Lady Cursed Wrist left them behind. The woman saw the displeasure on Hyuga Hassan's face and quickly explained, fearing that Hyuga Hassan would be angry. At the same time, Wuming put his hand on Hassan's shoulder and said to Hassan in a voice so small that the woman in front of him could not hear it. "Don't be angry, let's see the situation first. After all, Wuming should be more anxious." Unknown people mixed in with Godatsi, how could Wuming not be anxious? However, no matter what, he had to remain calm. Anger would spoil things. "Then, madam, can you take us to see the two knights? Maybe the two knights you mentioned are people I know." Wuming had a sincere smile on his face as he looked at the woman. Okay. The woman blushed slightly and nodded. Wuming was then looked down upon by Hassan. Wuming expressed that he was also very helpless. As a Round Table cowherd, a member of the Knights of the Round Table, Wuming's appearance was naturally online. It was not that Wuming deliberately flirted with her. Wuming was completely unjustly implicated, however, Hassan would not be so considerate of Wuming. He only knew that Wuming had just molested his compatriot. After the farce, the woman took Wuming and Hassan to a rather simple house. Although it was simple, compared with other houses, it was actually luxurious enough. It may be because this house was more luxurious than other houses, so it was arranged for Godatsi and the others to live in. "This is it, Sir Villo, Sir Hundred Faces," the woman said respectfully to Wuming and Hundred Faces. "Well, you don't have to worry about us. Go do your work first," Hassan said. Although it was not a village, Hassan was also a local, so she clearly knew that the villagers had things to do during the day. In a chaotic world, it was impossible to have leisure time. Only sleeping time at night could be counted as rest time. The woman did have something to do. After saying goodbye to Wuming and Hassan, she left. "Master Chaldea's servant is a knight?" After the woman left, Hassan looked at Wuming. Wuming did not tell Hassan the specific situation, just told him that he hoped to find Chaldea's master. Hassan did not ask much about Chaldea's master that Wuming said. So now, Hassan was slightly surprised to know that the person Wuming was looking for was a knight-type servant. Tachika's servant is a sub-servant possessed by Galahad, so it is not wrong to say that Matthew is a knight. Wuming explained to Hassan. "One of the two knights should be Matthew, but I have no clue about the other one." Wuming frowned. "In other words, is it an enemy?" Hassan's body tensed up and looked at the house in front of him with hostility. "It's not certain whether it is a knight of the holy city. Don't rush to a conclusion." Wuming shook his head. "That's true." Although Hassan said so, the vigilance of his body still did not weaken. As an assassin, he would not relax his vigilance because, it's not certain, because it would kill him quickly. "Let's go in and have a look," Wuming said and walked in. At this time, a voice suddenly came from behind the two. "Senior Villo." Wuming was happy when he heard the voice. It was Matthew's voice. Sure enough, Godatsi and Matthew came to this village. When Wuming was about to turn his head, Hassan, who turned his head ahead of Wuming, exclaimed. "It's you." Turning his head, Wuming looked at Mashu, who was smiling awkwardly, and Hassan, who had an angry look on his face. However, there was one thing that he could still see, and that was that there seemed to be some misunderstanding between the Hundred Faces Hassan and Godatsi. Right, the desert. Wuming suddenly remembered what Godatsi told him about what happened in the desert. They met Hassan, the man in black who kidnapped Pharaoh Nitocles, and they scared him away with Matthew's shield. Although the other party thought that Matthew was a holy city knight and retreated. But this was not the point. The point was that Hassan, the man in black who retreated, was Hassan. So, this grudge had already been formed. Well, I should have explained it to Hyuga Hassan first. At this time, a sister-like voice came from the house behind Wuming and Hassan. "Ah, isn't this the Villo? You found us so quickly." Wuming looked back and saw Mona Lisa, wearing blue and red clothes and holding a mechanical staff, standing at the door. "Da Vinci?" Wu Ming was not surprised, but now the focus was not on Da Vinci, but on the angry Hassan. As if he couldn't feel the anxious atmosphere at the scene, Da Vinci smiled and corrected Wu Ming's name. It's Da Vinci. The serious atmosphere was broken in an instant, and Matthew was a little overwhelmed. Even Hassan looked at Da Vinci speechlessly. But Da Vinci's help was good, and Wu Ming seized the opportunity to hold Hassan's shoulder and said to Hassan, "Anyway, let's go into the house first." Hassan of the 100 Faces nodded. She compromised. After all, she couldn't beat Wu Ming. Chapter 746. Although the house looked quite simple from the outside, Wu Ming found an unusual scene when he came into the room. In a room similar to a living room, the windows that were developed and transformed captured the light, filling the living room with light. The walls were dyed white, and Wu Ming, who had a good sense of smell, realized that it was modern paint. The floor was not land, but some marble-like stone bricks. There were neat and obvious gaps between the stone bricks, and there was no doubt that it was just laid. There was nothing extra in the neat living room, only a wooden table that served as a coffee table and 2 wooden chairs that looked like modern wooden sofas. Wu Ming and Hassan sat on one of the wooden chairs, Matthew and Da Vinci sat on the other wooden chair, and the 4 of them looked at each other silently. Hassan stared at Matthew, Matthew lowered his head and looked embarrassed, Da Vinci kept smiling and did nothing, and Wu Ming looked at the room. It can't be helped, such a modern design that is not in line with this era, I'm afraid only Da Vinci can do it. In other words, only Da Vinci would be bored enough to renovate a temporary house, and it seems that the renovation is not complete yet. After all, I'm a genius, I can't help but fix a house like this. Da Vinci explained to Wu Ming, who was looking around. Wu Ming looked at Da Vinci helplessly, then asked, "By the way, where did Tachika go?" After being invited into the house by Da Vinci, Wu Ming did not see Gadotsi. After using his spiritual perception, Wu Ming found that Gadotsi was indeed not there. She and Cursed Wrist Hassan went to help the villagers, so they are not here, Da Vinci explained with a smile. Not only did Gadotsi go to help the villagers, but so did Matthew. When he met Matthew outside the house, Matthew was holding a pile of hay in his hands. Now the hay was put in a room in the house by Matthew. In other words, only Da Vinci is slacking off, right? Wu Ming stated the truth rather calmly. Mashu, who lowered her head in embarrassment, raised her head and nodded. Mama, Da Vinci laughed. Leonardo da Vinci himself almost transformed this house into his own workshop, Matthew complained as a Chaldea employee. Cough cough. Dear Villo, is there anything you don't understand? The genius Da Vinci will personally explain it to you for free. Da Vinci, who realized that he would lose face if he continued, decisively changed the topic. Although Gadotsi wasn't here, Leonardo da Vinci could explain it clearly. So, what exactly happened since you left for the Holy City? Please tell me about it. Yes, Da Vinci's lecture is starting. With that said, Da Vinci took out a pair of glasses from somewhere and put them on his eyes. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci arrived at the Holy City in Da Vinci's car. After identifying themselves, the gatekeeper of the Holy City said, "Please wait for a moment, I need to report." However, in the process of waiting, the holy selection happened to begin. Gadotsi and her party naturally couldn't tolerate Gawain's behavior of slaughtering the refugees, so they fought against Gawain and the Solemn Knights. However, Matthew and Da Vinci naturally couldn't rescue the refugees alone, but fortunately, Gadotsi and the others had help. They happened to meet Knight Lucius, who had helped Gadotsi and the others in the desert, and Drunk Smoke Hassan, who wanted to sneak into the Holy City. In the end, Drunk Smoke Hassan risked his life to help Gadotsi and the others stop Gawain. After Lucius and Matthew jointly repelled the Solemn Knights, they successfully bought time for the refugees to escape. Hearing this, the atmosphere around 100 Faces Hassan seemed to be lonely. Is that so? Drunk Smoke Hassan has already left. After that, 100 Faces Hassan didn't say anything else. By the way, 100 Faces Hassan also put on the skull mask that Wu Ming had returned to her. Anyone could tell that 100 Faces Hassan was in a bad mood, so Da Vinci continued to explain. According to Drunk Smoke Hassan's instructions, we covered the refugees and came here. We also encountered Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was sneaking in the mountains. Then, Da Vinci that was close. In the end, we were almost caught by a knight we had never seen before. It was really thrilling. That knight should be Lancelot. Other than Drunk Smoke Hassan and Knight Lucius, is there no one else? Wyrm asked. After all, Azrael must have fought with Gawain, and Lancelot also said that he encountered the green-haired angel. Did she not appear in front of Gadotsi and the others? The knight who was chasing us was indeed attacked, but because it was too far away, we didn't see the situation clearly. Matthew took over Da Vinci and explained to Wyrm. Matthew and Gadotsi didn't see it clearly. Wyrm believed it, but Da Vinci might have seen it. Wyrm looked at Da Vinci vaguely, and then Wyrm found Da Vinci looking at him with a smile. Then, Wyrm calmly moved his head away. Maybe Da Vinci saw it. Wyrm had a feeling that Da Vinci's smile just now contained something. Azrael appeared in front of Da Vinci, and Da Vinci also knew that Azrael was Wyrm's subordinate. If she saw Azrael, then it was normal to guess that it was Wyrm. However, judging from Matthew's performance, Azrael did not seem to appear in front of Gadotsi and the others so far. Although Da Vinci vaguely knew, this was in line with Wyrm's warning to Azrael, don't show up easily. Then, Azrael should be around now. Wyrm thought so and looked out the window. At this moment, a feather fell from the window. Wyrm's eyes suddenly shrank. It was a feather of the skywing species. Sure enough, Azrael was nearby. Wyrm vaguely glanced at Hassan and Matthew, but neither of them noticed it. Then Wyrm vaguely looked at Da Vinci again and found that Da Vinci was looking at him with a smile. This guy definitely noticed. Wyrm's expression did not change at all, but he was shocked. I'm a genius. Da Vinci cast such a meaningful look at Wyrm. Then, Da Vinci did not care about Wyrm and continued his speech. Among the casualties this time, only smoke-drunk Hassan was a follower. As for the ordinary people, there were more than a dozen refugees who were not saved by us at the beginning. Most of the refugees were saved. Although Lancelot almost caught up with them in the end, the overall situation was not that bad. Seeing that Da Vinci did not mean to expose Wyrm, Wyrm simply did not care. At this point, the story of Chaldea's party was over, and the next thing was what happened now. It's been hard on you, Matthew, Wyrm said to Matthew. Although Da Vinci didn't say it that hard, Wyrm didn't think that Matthew and the others had it easy. Hey. No, in fact, I didn't have it hard, but Mr. Lucius had it harder. Miss Hassan even sacrificed her life because of this. Matthew said and stopped. Hassan, who seemed to have a good relationship with smoke-drunk Hassan, was still here. It was not good to talk too much. Looking at Hassan, who did not move, Matthew was relieved. By the way, why didn't I see Lucius? Wyrm asked. It seemed that the second knight follower was Lucius. However, Wyrm's sixth sense told him that the identity of Lucius was not simple. Chapter 747. Is it Mr. Lucius? If it's him, he should be helping the villagers now. Matthew pondered. After all, Mashu was separated from her beloved senior, and it was unlikely that she would know the location of Lucius. He's in the village. I'll look for him. Don't worry about me. Wyrm greeted and disappeared. Wyrm was also a follower, so naturally, he could still do spiritual transformation. Only Da Vinci, Matthew, and Hundred Faces Hassan were left in the room. It seems that there are some contradictions between us, Da Vinci said to Hundred Faces Hassan with a cheeky smile. Why was that? Because after Wyrm left, Hundred Faces Hassan's eyes had been fixed on Da Vinci and Matthew. Unlike Da Vinci, Matthew was a good boy. In any case, in the desert, they did hinder Hundred Faces Hassan's work. Therefore, Mashu wanted to apologize to him. That. Miss Hyakuga, about what happened in the desert, Mashu said apologetically. However, before Matthew could finish, 100 Faces Hassan interrupted Matthew. No need to say more. Because of the mask, Matthew couldn't see 100 Faces Hassan's face, nor could he see her eyes. He only knew that 100 Faces Hassan's voice was quite cold. Matthew was quite nervous. In her opinion, this negotiation was messed up. At the same time, 100 Faces Hassan continued to speak. You did hinder me from kidnapping the Sun King's pharaoh, but this time you saved my compatriots, and we're even. Huh? Matthew was taken aback. Although 100 Faces Hassan's voice was still cold, the words he said gave Matthew warmth. But, Miss Smoke Drunk Hassan, she. Matthew was speechless. In the end, they didn't save Smoke Drunk Hassan. In the end, they relied on Smoke Drunk Hassan's cover to successfully leave. Although it seemed that Drunk Smoke Hassan was trying to cover for the refugees to leave, Matthew and the others were also beneficiaries. Matthew felt guilty for abandoning his allies and escaping. That is Drunk Smoke's choice. I respect her choice. At the same time, I will also believe in the people she trusts. That's great, Miss Yagami. Thank you for your forgiveness and trust. Matthew was pleasantly surprised. No matter who was in the wrong, Matthew would be happy to see whoever apologized first and reached a peaceful ending. All right, reunion. Da Vinci, who had already seen through everything, celebrated with a smile. However, at this moment, the eyes of the 100 Faces Hassan's skull mask glowed. However, that doesn't mean that I've forgiven you for what you did to me in the desert. At that time, the 100 Faces Hassan took the initiative to retreat when he saw the pattern on Matthew's shield. This was a nicer way to put it, but a less pleasant way to put it was scared away. This was a matter of Hassan's reputation. He had to get it back. This was a matter of the reputation of the first Hassan who founded the Old Man of the Mountain cult. Well, he was definitely not worried about being cut down. Matthew was taken aback, and then he put on a look that looked like he was about to cry. The atmosphere instantly became cold again. Click, at this moment, the door opened. I heard from the villagers that assassin is here. Where is he? Where is he? The voice was heard before the person was seen. After the voice reached everyone's ears, the red-haired figure came into view. Gadotsi, who walked into the room, looked around and did not notice the atmosphere at all. Master, please pay attention to the atmosphere. Cursed Wrist Hassan, who came with Gadotsi and was still standing outside the door, reminded her softly and kindly. After Cursed Wrist Hassan's reminder, Gadotsi also realized the problem. Then Gadotsi touched her red hair and looked at everyone with a laugh. Ugh! Ahaha! Did I miss something? This made 100 Faces Hassan shake his head helplessly. With such a master around, he could not maintain the cold atmosphere. However, this was a pretty good master. On the other side, Wuming, who was missed by Gadotsi, was now wearing the silver-white armor and walking in the village. Because the news that a good knight who knew the two knights had come to the village, the villagers did not make a fuss about Wuming. This was also the reason why Wuming did not change his clothes. An armored knight with a known identity was better than an unknown person wearing ordinary clothes. The latter might cause trouble, so Wuming simply did not change his clothes. Moreover, he was now summoned as a Villo Knight. Ignoring the curious gazes of the villagers, Wuming kept a smile and walked around the village a little, but he did not find the Lucius that Matthew mentioned. Coincidentally, Wuming found the woman he met at the entrance of the village. Hence, Wuming hurriedly walked up to the woman with the standard smile of a round-table bull. Knight of the Knights, and started a conversation with the woman. We meet again, ma'am. I have something to ask. I don't know if it will cause you any trouble. No. No. How could it be? The woman blushed and nodded. I want to ask where Knight Lucius is. He might be an acquaintance of mine. I want to talk to him, but I don't see him in the village, so I want to ask. Wuming asked in an extremely gentle tone, which made the woman feel a little smug. Ma'am. Wuming responded and pulled the woman back to reality. Yes. Okay, Mr. Villo. The knight Lucius you are looking for is now at the cliff over there. The woman pointed to the direction Wuming. Thank you, ma'am. Wuming thanked her. Although he did not have any sleeves, he still left like a cloud. After knowing the destination, Wuming walked over slowly. Wuming always felt that Lucius was not the other party's real name, but a fake name. As for why, Wuming could only answer, intuition. Wuming's intuition was always accurate, so Wuming believed in his intuition. The woman did not lie to Wuming. Sure enough, Wuming found a knight wearing a white hooded cloak on the edge of a cliff. This Lucius took off the hood, and the silver-white ponytail fluttered behind Lucius. Although the back was facing, the silver hair gave people a feeling that the opposite party was very good-looking. Seeing this scene, Wuming did not have any other feelings, only, sure enough. It's really you, Minister Bedivere. Chapter 748. After hearing Wuming's voice, the knight who called himself Lucius was stunned. Then, he slowly turned his head. A delicate and pretty face that didn't look like a knight entered Silent Cry's eyes. Sir Villo. He said in an inexplicable tone with excitement. Looking at this familiar face, coupled with the way the other party addressed him, Wuming was completely sure that the other party was the knight he was familiar with and also witnessed the end of King Arthur, Bedivere. I didn't expect to see you here. Bedivere knelt on one knee and said to Wuming. However, Wuming controlled his spirit force to pull up Bedivere, who had not yet knelt down. You are always like this. I remember I said more than once that the person you need to kneel to is my king. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Because of Wuming's strength, reputation, and the knight's awe of Wuming, plus the relationship between Wuming and Artoria, Bedivere would want to salute Wuming every time he saw Wuming. However, Wuming also told Bedivere more than once, or every time, there was no need to treat him like this. Although Bedivere would agree verbally, it would still be the same the next time they met. It had become a habit. However, seeing Bedivere like this made Wuming quite nostalgic. Yes, I understand, Sir Villo. Bedivere stood up and replied. But it was estimated that he would forget again next time. You, on the other hand, should have already predicted my arrival. In the end, you still put on a very surprised look. Wuming teased. However, Bedivere shook his head. No, how could it be? Although I knew about your news from Miss Fujimaru, and I did think about the scene of meeting you, I didn't expect to meet you at this moment. After all, from the information he learned from Godatsi, Wuming should still be in the Sky Fortress summoned from another world, Abant. He didn't expect Abant to be able to move, and move so fast that he could meet Wuming in these mountains. Wuming chuckled. Then, with a casual point of his finger, 2 stone stools appeared on the spot. Sit down and talk. Wuming sat on one of the stone benches and looked at Bedivere. Yes. Bedivere, like obeying the words of his boss, sat on the stone bench next to Wuming. The two looked into the distance together. The beautiful sky made people forget to go back. However, this did not prevent Wuming and Bedivere. How much do you know about my king? Wuming asked without looking back. Bedivere was silent for a few seconds and then replied. Everything. After saying that, Bedivere lowered his head in guilt. Hearing Bedivere's inexplicable answer, Wuming didn't have the slightest bit of confusion. On the contrary, he had already understood the whole story. The holy sword was not returned to the lake sprite, so King Arthur did not die. Without the holy sword, he picked up the holy spear, and finally became the king of the undead walking on the earth, the Lion King, and came to this singularity. In the story of King Arthur, it was Knight Bedivere who was responsible for returning the holy sword. In addition, Bedivere did not respond to the Lion King's summon, so the matter naturally happened to Bedivere. You came here because you want to return the holy sword to my king. Wuming thought of the information provided by Da Vinci. They met the help of Lucius, who wanted to sneak into the holy city at the gate of the holy city. What was the purpose of sneaking into the holy city? Naturally, it was impossible to assassinate the Lion King. Combined with Bedivere's identity, only returning the holy sword was in line with what he wanted to do. Yes, you are right, Sir Villo. I must return the holy sword to my king. This is my sin, my responsibility. Bedivere's expression looked somewhat guilty. Looking at the guilty Bedivere, Wyrm was attracted by Bedivere's right hand. Originally, Bedivere's right arm should have been empty, but now there was an extra silver white arm. With Wyrm's knowledge, at such a close distance, he could naturally see what the extra silver arm was. It was the holy sword that changed its shape and effect. This is Merlin's technique. Without guessing, Wyrm knew that it was Merlin's doing. Wyrm once again thought of Merlin's expression when he told him about the Uruk singularity. That despicable face made it clear that Merlin must be up to something again. And Bedivere was probably one of the things that Merlin did. Wyrm even thought that he was one of the things that Merlin did. You are right. Because His Excellency Merlin couldn't leave the Forbidden Tower, he helped me inlay this arm and guided me here. Bedivere held his right arm with a face full of responsibility. However, immediately after, Bedivere relaxed. However, since you are here, Sir Villo, I don't think I'm needed. I don't think so. Without waiting for Bedivere to finish, Wyrm directly interrupted him. Wyrm looked at Bedivere's somewhat surprised eyes and said, whether as my king's subject or as an atonement, you have the need to return the holy sword to my king in person. Bedivere lowered his head guiltily. I chose the wrong path again. I'm sorry, Sir Villo. However, Wyrm just smiled. With me helping you from behind, it'll be fine as long as you have the courage to try. This was one of the reasons why the Knights of the Round Table admired Wyrm. He could always help the knights when they were on the wrong path. Not only for the knights, but Wyrm was also the same for Artoria. If it weren't for Wyrm being weak at that time and being sent away by Morgan Le Fay, the Arthur dynasty would not have collapsed, but would have been pulled back by Wyrm. Yes. Sir Villo, thank you very much. Bedivere smiled. With Wyrm, he seemed to have a backbone, as if he had 100% confidence in saving the king. The British Silver Dragon not only guarded the territory of Britain, but also the hearts of the people in the territory. By the way, this is for you, Wyrm said. Golden ripples appeared beside him, and a bottle of red potion was spat out from the ripples. This is... Bedivere caught the red potion spat out from the golden ripples with a puzzled look. He couldn't understand what it was. If it was Merlin, he should be able to understand it. Bedivere thought so. A potion to restore vitality. Your body is full of holes. Although it can't cure the symptoms, at least it can make you feel better. Chapter 749. Bedivere was stunned. Sure enough, how could he hide his physical condition from Mr. Villo? Mr. Villo, you can see it, Wyrm nodded as a matter of course. I can see it. Whether it's the truth that you are not a servant but a human, or the truth that the arm is constantly destroying your body, I can see it. Wyrm sighed. It's been hard for you for nearly 1,000 years, Bedivere. Although it was not clear what Bedivere had experienced in the past 1,000 years, Wyrm knew that it must be a bad feeling. I don't feel pain, Mr. Villo, this is what I should bear. Bedivere smiled at Wyrm. The strength of the heart was more important than the strength of the body. Nearly 1,000 years had worn away Bedivere's body, but Bedivere's heart was not shaken at all. He had been looking for King Arthur, looking for the king of the undead who walked on the earth because of his mistake. His ultimate goal was to make up for his mistakes. I'm used to the pain of the body. Bedivere's eyes flashed with hope that would not be extinguished. It was a strong hope to redeem Artoria. As long as there was a goal and did not give up, mortals could be compared to gods. Wyrm smiled. This was the Bedivere he knew, this was the Bedivere he knew, this was the Knight of the Round Table. But it's still the same sentence, since I'm here, it's okay to relax a little. Yes, Mr. Villo, I will rely on you. Bedivere nodded, then opened the red potion given by Wyrm and drank it. But then, Bedivere's eyes widened. This potion, Wyrm looked at him doubtfully. Was there a problem with this potion? Impossible, right? It seems a bit sweet. Bedivere said thoughtfully. Wyrm smiled helplessly. This guy, as always, made jokes that he didn't realize. Assassin. At this time, Godatzi's voice came from a distance behind. Tachika is here. Wyrm looked behind him. Godatzi was running toward here. Then, Wyrm stood up and looked at Bedivere beside him. Then, let's go, Knight Lucius. Since Bedivere intended to hide his identity, Wyrm would not ask more, and he would not uncover Bedivere's true identity. After all, this kind of thing should be explained by the person himself. Wyrm wouldn't cross the line, not to mention that Bedivere was one of his own. After Wyrm finished speaking, he walked towards the direction where Godatzi came from. Lucius. Bedivere shook his head. This name was only given because of his relationship with the silver right hand, so it didn't matter if his identity was exposed or not. At the gate of the holy city, if drunk Hassan hadn't risked his life to hold Gawain back, he would have been exposed at that time. But thanks to drunk Hassan's cover, most of the refugees were successfully rescued by Matthew and Bedivere. In fact, if Bedivere was there, drunk Hassan might not have died. His right hand restrained the Knights of the Round Table who were endowed with the blessing of the Holy Grail, so Gawain couldn't do anything to him. But he couldn't take down Gawain either. However, in that case, the number of rescued refugees may be reduced. Drunk Hassan did not have the silver arm like Bedivere. Bedivere was more efficient in defeating the Solemn Knight. But even so, the result was still uncertain. Maybe none of them could escape at that time. And the past can't be changed, only made up. So Bedivere was not going to regret it, but he was going to take more care of these villagers. Standing up, Bedivere turned and walked back along Wyrm's path. From a distance, he saw Godatzi throw herself into Wyrm's arms. Bedivere had never seen Godatzi throw herself into anyone's arms, so he was a little surprised. Is the relationship between Sir Fujimaru and Vilos so good? The atmosphere between the two looks like siblings. Bedivere's first thought was not a couple, but a brother and sister. If it weren't for the hair color, face shape, and timeline, Bedivere might really think that Wyrm and Godatzi were siblings. Shaking his head, Bedivere strolled over and stopped 5 meters away from the two. After all, he was not like Mordred, he was very good at reading the atmosphere. At this time, Godatzi and Wyrm also separated and talked. I'm sorry, assassin, we failed to live up to the task you entrusted to us. We couldn't enter the holy city and be your ambassador. Godatzi lowered her head with some guilt. But you saved a lot of human beings. I'm very satisfied that you could make the choice you thought was right at that time. Wyrm rubbed Godatzi's little head and comforted her. That's right, I guessed that assassin would say that. Godatzi raised her head, and the gloomy look disappeared in an instant. Wyrm laughed involuntarily and put on a, I was fooled by you, look. Well, it's not that Wyrm deliberately pretended to be deceived, he's just spoiling Godatzi. Senpai, in the distance, Matthew panted and shouted as he ran over. Ah, Matthew. Godatzi waved to Matthew. Not only that, but Matthew was followed by Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hyuga Hassan, and Da Vinci. Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Mashu ran over, but Da Vinci walked over at a leisurely pace. Senpai Vilo, Mr. Lucius, hello. Matthew, who arrived in front of Godatzi first, greeted Wyrm and Lucius. Is Mr. Lucius here? I didn't see him just now, Godatzi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Don't worry about me, Mr. Fujimaru. However, Bedivere shook his head. He didn't care if he was noticed or not. But you, senpai, you ran too fast. Matthew looked depressed. After learning from Da Vinci that Wyrm went to find Lucius, Godatzi ran out quickly. Although she and Cursed Wrist Hassan quickly followed, they were still left behind by Godatzi. Godatzi, who looked around, finally learned about Wyrm's whereabouts from a woman with a rather rosy face. Hyuga Hassan, who joined the search for Godatzi, saw Godatzi. After informing Cursed Wrist Hassan and Matthew, they all followed her. As for Da Vinci, he was just watching. Seeing so many people, Wuming simply stopped chatting with Gadotsi. "Everyone, I have something to say." Wuming spoke. He was ready to explain what was going to happen next. Looking around at everyone, Wuming continued. "I already have a preliminary plan." Chapter 750. Because of Wuming, everyone came to the residence of Gadotsi and others, ready to discuss Wuming's plan. Because of this, Bedivere did not clarify his identity to Gadotsi and others. But identity or not, it didn't matter to Gadotsi. Whether it was Lucius or Bedivere, they were all good people who helped them, weren't they? In the room, a stone round table was placed in the center of the room, which was created by Wuming with Create Green item. When he saw this table, Bedivere was shocked because, except for some details and patterns, this was exactly Camelot's round table. But because Bedivere was currently concealing his identity, he controlled his expression very well. Everyone sat around the round table, sitting on a stone seat with a backrest like a throne made by Wuming, waiting for Wuming, who was sitting at the head of the table, to speak. This made Bedivere a little helpless. Wuming completely recreated the round table, and those seats were where the knights of the round table sat. But Bedivere just thought about it in his heart and did not say it out loud. Da Vinci was a little interested in the stone seat he was sitting on and the round table in front of him. He looked around as if he wanted to observe these arts. Although Gadotsi was not as serious as Da Vinci, she was also very interested in these stone seats and round tables. On the other hand, Hundred Faces Hassan and Cursed Wrist Hassan sat upright with serious expressions. Matthew, on the other hand, looked quite nervous. Matthew knew that his servant was Galahad, but he didn't know that the table in front of him was a round table. He just felt nervous subconsciously. It seemed that it was because of Galahad that caused Matthew to have such a timid appearance. "First of all, Tachika, I'll leave this to you." Wuming looked at Gadotsi. Then, golden ripples appeared beside Wuming, and a golden cup emerged from the ripples. "This is the Holy Grail?" Matthew shouted excitedly. Except for Hassan, who had already seen it once, others were more or less surprised, especially Chaldea's group. There was no other reason, but the Holy Grail this time was too easy to obtain. "This is what I got from the Sun King, this special Holy Grail," Wuming said and threw it to Gadotsi. "Hey!" Gadotsi caught the Holy Grail rather agilely. After experiencing this kind of catching movement several times, Gadotsi was no longer the child who was easily flustered at the beginning. "Doctor, can you recover the Holy Grail?" Gadotsi raised her arm and asked the bracelet on her wrist. In response, the bracelet made a sound. "Just wait a moment, because I didn't expect you, I need to wait a moment." However, Roman's voice gave people the feeling that he was flustered. "Recovery is not urgent. Romani, can you identify this Holy Grail?" Da Vinci said to the air. Although Da Vinci was not close to Gadotsi, Romani, who was monitoring the scene, still heard Da Vinci's words. "Identification is still possible, I'll do it now." Roman's voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet. With the bracelet and the Holy Grail in such a close distance, identification was not a problem. Da Vinci knew this, so he made this request to Roman. And Da Vinci asked Roman to identify the Holy Grail, not because he did not trust Wuming, but because it was a necessary process. It was always right to be cautious, and Wuming agreed with this point, so Wuming did not say anything. Identification is complete, it is indeed the Holy Grail, but... Roman seemed to want to say something, but he hesitated. However, Roman still said it out loud. Although it is the Holy Grail, it is still impossible to determine whether it is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity. Roman's tone was full of caution, as if he was afraid of offending people. "Doctor, this is the Holy Grail that Senior Villo painstakingly obtained from the Sun King, how can you have doubts?" Matthew righteously defended his senior. "I believe in Assassin, since he said it is the Holy Grail of this singularity, then it must be." Gadotsi expressed her trust in Wuming. Ah, Romani is being targeted, Da Vinci laughed in schadenfreude. That's why I was considering whether to say it or not. Roman sighed helplessly. However, it is not unreasonable to be cautious. Roman having such a guess makes me happy. Seeing Roman so embarrassed and helpless, Wuming could not help but help him find a way out. Wuming changed his tone and continued to speak. However, whether this Holy Grail is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity or not, it has no impact on our next plan. Oh, did you find something unusual? Da Vinci looked at Wuming curiously. Wuming nodded as if it was a matter of course. The safety of this singularity is now in the hands of the Lion King. She has the power to destroy this singularity, and also the power to destroy this singularity. Because Artoria hid something from Wuming, Wuming guessed that what Artoria hid was the most important thing. Maybe it was related to the safety of this singularity. Indeed, in this way, whether this Holy Grail is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity or not is meaningless. Roman understood what Wuming meant. If this singularity was affected by the Lion King, then even if the Holy Grail was recovered, it would not be able to completely save this singularity. Others also understood this truth. Then what we need to do now is to defeat the Lion King. Bedivere asked. After all, if it was Artoria that caused this singularity, then it must be Bedivere's doing. Therefore, to defeat the king and bring the king back to the right path, he had to do his part. Although things are not completely clear yet, it is certain that we are currently hostile to the Lion King. Wuming did not answer Bedivere's question. In short, let's gather our forces first. Wuming's words made everyone realize. Indeed, other than Wuming who could fight, no one here could compete with the Knights of the Round Table one-on-one. Hassan was an assassin, Da Vinci was a magician, and Matthew was a defender. There was no way they could compete with the knights in frontal combat. My Skywing Legion can only be used as a one-time-use Joker card due to Fury, so we still lack a critical force. Wuming said as he looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan. The critical force you are talking about, could it be? Seeing that Cursed Wrist Hassan understood what he meant, Wuming smiled. Yes, it's what you think. Chapter 751. Excuse me. What exactly are Senior Villo and Mr. Cursing Wrist talking about? Matthew, being a curious child, asked. And the person who answered Matthew was Hundred Faces Hassan. They should be talking about the first Hassan. However, Hundred Faces Hassan seemed to be in a bad mood at the moment, and his words were a little harsh. Yes, the key force I'm talking about is the original Hassan, the first Hassan who is known as the King of Hassan. Wuming nodded without delving into Hundred Faces Hassan's tone. Oh. Isn't that King Hassan? It feels so cool. Gadotsi leaned forward and looked at Wuming with an excited look. Because the content of the previous discussion was not familiar to Hundred Faces Hassan and Cursing Wrist Hassan, the two of them did not interrupt before. But now that they were talking about things they were familiar with, Hundred Faces Hassan and Cursing Wrist Hassan began to explain to everyone. The first Hassan, that is the most mysterious Hassan. No one knows whether it is a man or a woman, and no one can catch its trace. Even the people who are targeted by the first Hassan may not be able to see it before they die. After Cursing Wrist Hassan finished speaking, everyone except Hundred Faces Hassan and Wuming had a surprised expression. Doesn't that mean that the first Hassan's assassination technique has reached the point of being amazing? Matthew explained his understanding. At this time, on Gadotsi's bracelet, Roman and Chaldea also made a sound. Matthew's understanding is indeed correct. I checked the information and found that there are very few descriptions of the first Hassan in the information. Other than the simple, founder of the Elders of the Mountain, and Hassan who killed Hassan, there are basically no other records. Huh? So mysterious. Matthew was stunned. This seemed to be a big shot. As a magician, Matthew clearly realized that the more mysterious something was, the more powerful it was. For such a mysterious first-generation Hassan, Mashu felt that the other party may be a super powerful person. Although I agree with Mashu's words, I'm more concerned about the Hassan who killed Hassan. Da Vinci suddenly said. Why? Gadotsi was puzzled. We'll have to answer that question, said Cursed Wrist Hassan. Knowing that Chaldea came from the future, Hassan the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan were not surprised that the other party knew about Hassan's secret. Following Cursed Wrist Hassan's words, 100 Faces Hassan continued. The so-called first Hassan who kills Hassan is because the first Hassan will behead the other Hassans when they go astray. Going astray. Matthew murmured thoughtfully. Continuing Hassan's words, Cursed Wrist Hassan said again. Although that's what they say, in reality, there are very few Hassans who have been beheaded by the first generation. After all, the elders of the mountain don't act for selfish reasons, so it's unlikely that we'll be beheaded by the first generation, Hassan the All-Seeing finally added. In other words, it was basically impossible to encounter them. Then how do we find the first Hassan? Gadotsi slumped on the table, looking powerless. After all, whether it was Roman's statement that the first Hassan was extremely mysterious, or Hassan the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan's statement that it was almost impossible to meet them, it meant that the first Hassan was not easy to find. However, the corner of Wuming's mouth began to twitch slightly. The first Hassan came to him and slashed him. So, we need Cursed Wrist Hassan's help, Wuming said as he looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan. At the same time, everyone followed Wuming's gaze and looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, which made Cursed Wrist Hassan feel a little restrained. Just when Hassan the All-Seeing was about to say something, Cursed Wrist Hassan spoke before Hassan the All-Seeing could. I do know how to find the first Hassan. Cursed Wrist Hassan nodded. Seeing that Cursed Wrist Hassan spoke, Hassan the All-Seeing did not say anything else. In other words, as long as it's Hassan, he will definitely know this, Cursed Wrist Hassan continued. So, Hassan the All-Seeing also knows how to find the first Hassan? Gadotsi said, drawing inferences from one case. Yes, I can also find the first Hassan. Without any evasiveness or hesitation, Hassan the All-Seeing admitted it naturally. However, with Hassan the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan's admission, the previous words of, the first Hassan is difficult to find, were a little bit of a slap in the face. As soon as they said that the first Hassan was difficult to find, Wuming revealed that Cursed Wrist Hassan could find the first Hassan, and Hassan the All-Seeing admitted that she could do it too. This made Gadotsi and Matthew speechless. Maybe there's something that's hard to say. Gadotsi and Matthew thought so in their hearts. Then, why did Senior Villo only point out Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan and not Ms. Hassan the All-Seeing? Matthew raised his hand and asked. The reason is simple. Cursed Wrist Hassan is a local, Wuming replied concisely. Gadotsi and Matthew could not understand this answer at all. Could it be that Hassan the All-Seeing was not a local? The local, that Villo said, I'm afraid he doesn't refer to this area, but to this era, Da Vinci said. Da Vinci is right, because Cursed Wrist Hassan is a person of this era. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, then looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan. Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan, you should be a servant, right? Although Matthew was not very powerful, he could almost perceive the identity of Cursed Wrist Hassan. There was no doubt that he was a servant. Whether it was the spiritual form or the combat power comparable to a servant, it was solid evidence. I am indeed a servant, but this era is indeed my era, or the era not long after my death. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan did not understand one thing. How do you know about this? Cursed Wrist Hassan asked Wuming in a very respectful tone. Whether it was the powerful strength of Wuming that he heard from Gadotsi, or Wuming's ability to know Hassan's secret intelligence, Wuming was worthy of Cursed Wrist Hassan's respect. Wuming smiled slightly and answered Cursed Wrist Hassan's question. I know from the villagers. Cursed Wrist Hassan and All-Seeing Hassan were stunned, and then they understood. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. No wonder you have the assassin class adaptability. Even Da Vinci praised Wuming. However, not everyone understood, and there were still two people who did not understand. What the hell is going on? Don't keep us guessing. Gadotsi said unhappily. Only she and Matthew could not understand, and it was really uncomfortable. Cursed Wrist Hassan gave the answer. I'm afraid it's because of the villagers' conversation. Chapter 752. The villagers' conversation. What does that mean? Godatsi was a little puzzled. Could it be that Wyrm had tricked the villagers? Then, Wyrm knocked her on the head. Ouch! Godatsi shouted while holding her head. I'm not as bad as you think. Wyrm explained. I only said that I accidentally heard about cursed wrist Hassan from the villagers when I was looking for Lucius. After all, the villagers did not have any entertainment facilities and were caught in the middle of a war. They could only chat to relieve their boredom. If the person he knew was powerful and kind, then there would be a lot of people talking about him. Wyrm happened to hear something when he was looking for Lucius in the village. Through Wyrm's own judgment and analysis, he came to the conclusion that cursed wrist Hassan was a local. I didn't ask at all. Wyrm shrugged, indicating that he was innocent. However, Hundred-Face Hassan did not believe it. I don't think you can guess cursed wrist's identity from the villagers' chatter. So she directly expressed her disbelief. However, there would always be someone who believed it. And if the person involved believed it, then the others would have nothing to say. No, Hundred-Face, there is indeed such a possibility. Cursed Wrist shook his head at Hundred-Face Hassan, denying his doubts. After that, Hundred-Face Hassan did not say anything. Although she was a local, she was not from East Village where Cursed Wrist Hassan was from. As the host, Cursed Wrist Hassan was more right than she was. Cursed Wrist Hassan himself knew that the villagers would talk about him from time to time, and he had inadvertently overheard the content of the discussion a few times. So, he was not surprised that Wyrm could guess his identity. So, it's much more convenient for Hassan of this generation to lead the team to look for the first Hassan than someone who is not from this generation, isn't it? Wyrm said as he glanced at Hundred-Face Hassan. Although Wyrm didn't have much sarcasm, in Hassan's eyes, Wyrm's glance was quite sarcastic. Humph. Out of sight, out of mind, Hassan turned his head away from Wyrm. Seeing this, Cursed Wrist Hassan also knowingly diverted everyone's attention to the topic. Then, let me lead everyone to find the first Hassan. Hassan's body moved as if he wanted to say something, but after a slight struggle, he stopped. This was naturally reflected in Wyrm's eyes. Coupled with Hundred-Faces Hassan's hesitation and Cursed Wrist Hassan's concealment earlier, Wyrm could tell that there must be something that was hard to say. Cursed Wrist Hassan, where can I find the first Hassan? What's the price? This question stunned everyone. The first point wasn't a big deal, but the second point was the key point. Generally speaking, this kind of thing was discovered by oneself. Why did Wyrm ask directly? Sometimes, Wyrm still wanted to be a straightforward person. After all, being a detective was very taxing on his brain cells. In the mountains to the north, there's a Yazril temple. It's the holy land of the Hassans. Legend has it that the first Hassan has been sleeping in the temple, Cursed Wrist Hassan said, and could not help but look to the north. Hassan also spoke at this moment. Although it's a legend, we firmly believe that the first Hassan is sleeping there, Hassan said respectfully. Wyrm nodded and then changed the topic. So, what's the price? Is it sacrificing the life of the current Hassan? Huh? Wyrm's words made Godatsi and Matthew exclaim in amazement. After all, the contrast was too great. To ask someone for help, one had to pay with one's life. Even if it was not one's own life, but someone else's life, in the eyes of Godatsi and Matthew, this was not allowed. Is this true, Cursed Wrist Hassan? Godatsi shouted Cursed Wrist Hassan's name with a serious expression. Because the leader of the old men in the mountains was Hassan Sabah, he could not be addressed as Hassan Sabah. After all, there were other Hassans. Therefore, Cursed Wrist Hassan said that it was fine to call himself Cursed Wrist Hassan. That was why Godatsi called him that. Please tell us the truth, Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan. As a polite and cute little eggplant, Matthew added honorifics. In desperation, Cursed Wrist Hassan could only nod. It's indeed as His Excellency Vilo said. To seek the help of the first Hassan, one has to pay with the life of a Hassan, and that Hassan is me, the current Hassan. Is that really the case? Gadotsi was stunned. Then, how did Senior Villo know? Matthew looked at Wuming in confusion. I'm afraid it's because the first Hassan is the Hassan who killed Hassan. Da Vinci, who had been silent for a long time, spoke up. Da Vinci is right. In fact, you can understand it if you think about it carefully. Wuming nodded and motioned for Gadotsi and Matthew to think about it. The first Hassan would kill Hassan who had gone astray. If seeking the help of the first Hassan was considered going astray, then one Hassan would be killed. But the question was whether seeking the help of the first Hassan was going astray. Generally speaking, this should not be considered going astray. Matthew and Gadotsi thought so. However, the truth was sometimes so unexpected. Seeking the help of the first Hassan, in our opinion, is actually going astray. 100 Faces Hassan regretfully stated the truth. If that's the case, if we seek the help of the first Hassan, wouldn't it be? Gadotsi said and looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, who did not waver at all. Yes, we need to sacrifice Cursed Wrist Hassan. 100 Faces Hassan nodded. This was also the reason why she hesitated before. In 100 Faces Hassan's opinion, Wuming was already very powerful. It did not matter whether they sought the help of the first Hassan or not. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan had not seen Wuming's true ability, so when Wuming proposed to seek the help of the first Hassan, Cursed Wrist Hassan did not refuse. This is easy to handle. I have a way to solve this problem. Wuming smiled mysteriously. At this time, someone needed to make a statement. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded at the same time. We believe in the assassin, Senior Villo, the two said in unison. In that case, I'll believe in His Excellency Villo for once. Cursed Wrist Hassan chose to believe in Wuming, or rather, he chose to believe in the person that Chaldea's master trusted. I also want to see what the Villo has to do. Da Vinci naturally did not need to say much. In the end, only 100 Faces Hassan was left. Since Cursed Wrist Hassan has said so, what else can I do? 100 Faces Hassan nodded helplessly. Well, since the problem is solved, let's split up. Wuming nodded with satisfaction. Split up. 5 doubts filled everyone's mind. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.